Chapter 1. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Sarah Thompson's bakery, casting a golden glow over the countertops dusted with flour and sugar. Sarah stood in the heart of her bakery, poised with a pastry bag in hand as she meticulously piped rosettes onto the wedding shower cake. The scent of vanilla and butter swirled around her. "Careful with those roses, you're making it look like an actual garden," Lola Sanchez teased from across the room, her voice rich with amusement. She balanced atop a stepladder, draping lengths of delicate pink tulle along the shelves, brimming with lovingly baked goods. Sarah chuckled, not lifting her gaze from the task at hand. "That's the idea. It has to be perfect. It's not every day your best friend throws you a wedding shower." Her eyes were focused, but the corners crinkled with joy at the thought of celebrating her upcoming nuptials. Lola descended the ladder with the grace of someone who spent more time in courtrooms than climbing furniture, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "You know I only want the best for you, Sarah. This place is going to look magical by the time we're done with it." "Thanks to you," Sarah replied, finally looking up to flash a smile at Lola. "I still can't believe you're doing all this for me." "Believe it," Lola stated firmly, her hands resting on her hips as she surveyed the bakery with a critical eye. Her driven nature was evident even in the way she approached party planning, a strategic mind mapping out every last detail. "Ah, the perks of having a lawyer as your best friend. You'd think this was a high-profile case with the way you're orchestrating everything," Sarah quipped, setting down the pastry bag and stepping back to admire the cake. "Only the best for you, Querida," Lola said, using the term of endearment that always reminded Sarah of their deep-rooted bond. "Besides, if I can handle the courtroom, I can certainly handle some tulle and fairy lights. Speaking of which, you might need to save me from a catastrophe. What do you think?" Sarah gestured toward the cake, seeking Lola's approval. Lola approached, her scrutinizing gaze softening as she took in the elaborate confection. "It's beautiful, Sarah, just like you. It embodies the warmth and love you bring to everything you touch." She reached out, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You've come so far, and you deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way." A swell of gratitude filled Sarah's chest, and for a moment, she allowed herself to bask in the pride of her achievements, her successful bakery, her cherished friendships, and the love that had blossomed in her life. "Thank you, Lola. That means the world to me." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "All right, enough sappiness. We've got a shower to prepare." Lola's assertive tone was softened by the twinkle in her eye. "Lead the way, boss lady," Sarah replied, her laughter mingling with the comforting cadence of a homegrown life, one filled with the sweetness of friendship and the promise of new beginnings. The chime above the door heralded Rachel Adams' entrance, her blonde hair framing a face lit with excitement as she navigated through the doorway, arms laden with boxes and bags that rustled with the promise of festivity. Rachel's curvy figure was a familiar sight in Sarah's bakery, one that brought an immediate smile to Sarah's face. "Got enough there, Rachel?" Sarah teased, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron as she moved to help. "Never enough when it comes to celebrating you," Rachel replied. She set down her burdens with care, revealing a kaleidoscope of pastel streamers and delicate paper flowers. "I thought these would look lovely near the window, catching the morning light." "Perfect," Sarah said, admiring the decorations that seemed to echo the soft hues of sunrise spreading across the Texas sky. Before the two could further their plans, another arrival marked the progression of the day. Danielle Carter pushed through the door, her wavy brown hair bouncing with each step, a box of custom-made t-shirts cradled in her arms. The shirts, emblazoned with clever quips and inside jokes only the closest of friends could appreciate, were a testament to Danielle's creative soul. "Behold, the piece de resistance for tonight's shenanigans," Danielle announced, her laughter filling the bakery like the rich aroma of fresh coffee. "Those are amazing, Danny," Sarah exclaimed, unfolding one of the shirts to reveal the playful design. "You've outdone yourself." "Only the best for my girl," Danielle said, her eyes crinkling at the corners with pride. "Thank you, both of you," Sarah said, enveloping each friend in turn with a heartfelt hug. "This wouldn't be happening without you." "Are you kidding? We wouldn't miss it for the world," Rachel interjected, her gaze momentarily distant. Besides, Danielle added with a wink, planning your wedding shower is the perfect excuse to flex my creative muscles. Her words carried the unspoken dream of finding someone who cherished her imaginative spirit as much as her friends did. Let's get to it, then, Sarah declared, rolling up her sleeves with renewed vigor. Today, we bake, we decorate, and we celebrate the love that's been kneaded into every corner of this place. In the cozy confines of the kitchen, the trio set about transforming the space. Streamers danced from the ceiling, t-shirts found their proud place on display, and laughter intertwined with the whir of mixers and the clinking of measuring cups. The bakery, Sarah's labor of love, was coming alive with the same care and joy she had poured into her cakes, and into her friendships. Looks like it's all coming together, Rachel observed, standing back to admire their handiwork. Of course, it is, Danielle chimed in. Sarah looked around at the bakery, now brimming with color and camaraderie. It wasn't just flour and sugar that made her business thrive, it was moments like these, full of affection and shared dreams, that truly fed her soul. The front door of the bakery chimed, heralding Natalie Lee's entrance like a gust of fresh air after a long shift. She pushed through, her nursing scrubs a testament to hours of selfless care, creases mapping her devotion. A ponytail held her black hair in a practical grip, though a few strands had escaped to frame her determined face. Her glasses caught the light as she surveyed the scene before her, ready to trade the sterility of hospital halls for the warmth of friendship and frosting. Hey, y'all! Natalie called out, her voice carrying the weight of fatigue edged with enthusiasm. The aroma of buttery pastries wrapped around her, soothing the ache in her feet, a silent exchange between the haven of the bakery and the healer who stepped into it. Sarah glanced up from where she was adjusting a batch of cupcakes on display. Her heart swelled at the sight of Natalie. With flour dusting her apron and an affectionate smile playing on her lips, Sarah moved forward to greet her. Nat. I'm so glad you could make it, Sarah exclaimed, opening her arms wide. Their hug was an embrace of mutual respect and shared history, a comfortable press of curves and companionship that spoke volumes of their bond. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Natalie replied, her words slightly muffled against Sarah's shoulder. Pulling back, she looked around at the decorations lacing the ceiling and the t-shirts that promised laughter in the hours to come. Looks like you've been busy. Busy is just part of the recipe here, Sarah said with a laugh. But it's nothing compared to a nurse's schedule. Thank you for being here, Nat. It means everything. Of course, Sarah. Natalie's gaze met hers, sincerity etched behind her lenses. You've always been there for us. Now it's our turn to support you. Rachel and Danielle nodded in agreement from their spots among the festoons and fondant, their smiles echoing the sentiment. In that moment, the bakery felt less like a business and more like a home. Sarah led the way into the kitchen, where the scent of baking bread mingled with the sweet aroma of vanilla frosting. The warm, ambient glow of the ovens cast a cozy light on the countertops laden with utensils and mixing bowls. She turned to face her brigade of friends, their faces alight with eagerness. Okay, team, she said, resting her hands on the marble island that stood like an altar in the center of her culinary sanctuary. We've got a list as long as a Texas summer day, but together, we'll make it through before sundown. Lola leaned against the countertop. Give us the rundown, boss lady, she said, a playful edge to her voice that softened the steel of her lawyer persona. Right, Sarah began, her gaze touching each friend in turn, gratitude bubbling inside her. Rachel, you're amazing with aesthetics, so you'll tackle setting up the party favors and place settings. Danielle, your creativity isn't just for the page, can you handle the playlist and lighting? Make sure it's got that perfect mix of fun and sentimental. Got it, Rachel confirmed, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear as she surveyed the boxes of delicate favors. Consider it done, Danielle chimed in, her writer's mind already crafting the evening's ambience. Nat, Sarah continued, noting the tired lines around Natalie's eyes from her recent shift, I hate to ask, but we could use your knack for organization to sort out the beverages and snacks. Just. Please, take it easy, okay? Natalie waved away the concern with a determined smile. Organizing meds is harder than appetizers. I'm on it. All right, Sarah paused, her eyes finally landing on Lola, the steadfast pillar among them. And Lola, she said, a touch of affection warming her voice, I need your eye for detail on the wedding shower cake. No one can spot an imperfection from a mile away, quite like you. Challenge accepted, Lola replied with a confident nod, stepping closer to the masterpiece that was the wedding shower cake, a confectionery tower that embodied elegance and promise. Together, they approached the cake, which stood resplendent on its pedestal, layers of sponge and cream awaiting the final flourishes. Sarah picked up a piping bag filled with blush-colored icing and handed it to Lola. The roses need your touch. Think you can make these bloom? Lola's fingers curled around the bag, her usually commanding hands turning gentle and precise. Watch me work my magic, she declared, leaning in to add more details to the flowers. Perfect, Sarah murmured, her heart swelling with pride, not just for the cake or her imminent wedding, but for the incredible women who surrounded her, each contributing their unique strengths to create something beautiful. Together, in the warmth of the bakery, they kneaded their friendship into something that would rise above any challenge, just like the dough resting quietly in the corner. Thanks, Lola, Sarah added softly, watching her friend work. This cake, this day. It wouldn't be the same without you all. As Rachel unfurled a streamer with the finesse of an experienced realtor showcasing a property, Danielle couldn't help but chuckle at her friend's meticulous nature. Remember senior prom? Rachel asked, taping one end to the wall. How we spent hours arguing over the exact shade of midnight blue for the balloons. Danielle laughed, the sound mingling with the crinkling of paper decorations. She draped a silken banner across the counter. And in the end, they all looked black in the dim lighting anyway, she added, her brow arching playfully. The bakery hummed with the energy of nostalgia as the two women wove memories into their tasks, each decoration hung a tribute to their shared past. The scent of vanilla and buttercream was a sweet backdrop to their laughter, the same way it had been when they'd shared secrets over lunch in the school cafeteria. Across the kitchen, Natalie leaned against the stainless steel countertop, her feet grateful for the respite from the relentless hospital floors. She peered at her phone, double-checking the list Sarah had given her. Hey, do we have enough of those mini quiches? Natalie asked, tapping her foot, a subtle motion betraying her eagerness to be useful. I can dash out and grab some more, or anything else we're short on. Sarah glanced up from her position beside Lola, a smile creasing her features. Would you? That'd be amazing, Nat. I think we're also low on rosemary, we can't run out during the herb-crusted chicken. Rosemary and quiches, got it, Natalie confirmed, pulling her hair tighter into its ponytail as if securing herself for the mission ahead. Her dedication as a nurse spilled into every aspect of her life, including making sure Sarah's wedding shower was flawless. Thanks, Nat, Sarah called out after her. You're a lifesaver. With a determined nod, Natalie made her way to the door. As she disappeared into the bustle of the small Texas town, the bakery continued to fill with the comforting sounds of preparation and anticipation, of friends coming together to ensure every detail was perfect for one of their own. Sarah looked down at the finished wedding cake with a smile. Remember when Jimmy Dawson tried to ask you out by writing it in icing on a cupcake? Rachel giggled from across the room. Which was sweet until it melted into "Will you make me a sand" during fourth period, Danielle added, both women unable to contain their laughter at the memory. Ah, high school romance, Sarah mused with a fond shake of her head, her hands not missing a beat as she adorned the cake with sugar-dusted roses. But we've come so far since then. Speaking of, how's the dating life, Ratch? Lola asked, glancing up briefly. Ugh, swiping left and right has become my new cardio, Rachel replied, grimacing. But hey, I built quite the portfolio of bad date stories, if nothing else. Girl, you're a successful real estate agent, Danielle encouraged her, pausing to look over at Rachel. You'll find someone who appreciates your ambition. Enough about me, Rachel deflected with a wave of her hand. Is anyone else dating someone decent? The other women all shook their heads. I fall in love with the hero of each book. I can't date anyone, Danielle said, looking sad. Sarah shook her head. You'll see. Real-life heroes are better than any fictional hero any day. Danielle laughed, shaking her head. Wait till you read the book I'm writing. You won't still feel that way. They all laughed. Those t-shirts are brilliant, Danny, Lola said, changing the subject as she pointed at the stack Danielle had brought in. Thanks. Danielle beamed. I figured, why not celebrate our girl getting hitched with something fun? Seriously, you all are amazing, Sarah interjected. She took a step back from the cake, admiring their collective work, the cake, the decorations, the t-shirts, all pieces of a puzzle that spelled out the bond they shared. Everything looks beautiful, Sarah continued, her gaze sweeping over the cozy interior of her bakery, now transformed for the celebration ahead. But what means the most to me is having you all here. This place, it's more than just flour and sugar, it's where my heart is. And you guys, you're a part of that. A huge part. Sarah, stop, Rachel said, her tone warm yet teasing, you're going to make us cry, and we can't ruin our makeup before the shower even starts. Too late, Natalie's voice chimed in from the doorway, her eyes bright despite the exhaustion shadowing them. I didn't run myself ragged for errands to come back to tears. Happy tears, Nat, Sarah reassured her, stepping forward to envelop her friend in a hug. Happy tears for all the love and support that's gotten me to this point. I couldn't have done any of this without you guys. You know we've got your back, always, Lola added, wrapping an arm around Sarah's shoulder. Plus, who else would put up with my cake disasters? Sarah joked, the lightness returning to her spirit. Exactly, Natalie agreed, smiling broadly. And let's not forget, we still have a bachelorette party to look forward to. Which will be epic, thanks to you all, Sarah said, her gratitude echoing off the walls of the little bakery that had seen them through thick and thin. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet aroma of baked apple pie as Sarah lifted the steaming pot from its cradle. Break time, ladies, she called out, her voice a soothing melody above the clatter of pans and rustle of tissue paper. Lola was the first to drop her ribbons, a look of sheer relief washing over her face. I thought you'd never say it, she sighed, collapsing into one of the pastel-painted chairs that hugged the small round tables scattered throughout the bakery. Sarah sliced through the flaky crust of her famous apple pie, the knife hitting the plate with a soft chink. As she placed generous portions onto mismatched plates, the cinnamon-spiced apples oozed their warmth, sending a comforting sweetness into the air. Natalie accepted her plate with a tired smile. This is exactly what I need after a 12-hour shift, she murmured, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear before taking a bite. The stress lines around her eyes seemed to smooth away with each taste. Danielle laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne as she leaned back in her chair, a white t-shirt draping her arm. You know, this pie could probably heal more hearts than all the medicine at the hospital. Or break more diets, Rachel added with mock despair, though her eyes twinkled with mirth as she sipped her coffee, the steam curling around her face like a gentle caress. Sarah watched her friends savor the moment, their faces alight with contentment and camaraderie. She wrapped her own fingers around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into her skin. This was more than just a coffee break, it was a communion of souls, an unspoken pact of unwavering support and shared history. Sarah, this pie. Lola began, pausing to savor another forkful. It's like a slice of heaven. You've outdone yourself. Thanks, Lola. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling. But it tastes better when I share it with you guys. Her gaze swept across the faces of her friends, each one etched with laughter lines and traces of life lived fully. These women were her pillars, standing strong against the winds of change and uncertainty. As they continued to chat, their laughter weaving a tapestry of memories within the cozy confines of the bakery, the minutes ticked by unnoticed, marking time in smiles and stories rather than seconds. But it wasn't long before the hands of the clock nudged them back to reality, reminding them of the tasks awaiting completion. With a collective sigh, the friends rose from their chairs, the lingering taste of pie on their tongues. Natalie tossed her paper napkin onto the plate, her movements now brisk with purpose. All right, let's get this party prepped, she declared, her fatigue forgotten beneath a fresh surge of adrenaline. Agreed, Danielle said. We've got a bachelorette to celebrate. Rachel gathered the remaining decorations, her artistic flair ready to transform the space once again. "Time to work our magic," she chimed, her enthusiasm infectious. Lola joined Sarah by the cake, her meticulous eye scanning for any imperfections. "Let's make this shower unforgettable." Sarah nodded, invigorated by the love that filled the room. Together, they returned to their tasks. They worked with a harmony that spoke of years of friendship, their shared bond a living force that pulsed through the very walls of the bakery. "Watch out, Sarah, I'm coming through with more streamers." Rachel's voice rang out clear and bright, cutting through the gentle hum of the oven timers. Her laughter bounced off the walls as she navigated around tables, her arms laden with rolls of cream and blush paper. "Need a hand?" Danielle offered, her writer's imagination already conjuring up scenes of the upcoming party. "Got it, thanks." Rachel replied, her smile never faltering even as she juggled the decorations with grace. Natalie leaned against the counter, rubbing her feet surreptitiously. The ache from her long shift was forgotten as she watched her friends come together, their movements fluid and sure. She marveled at how natural it felt, this dance of support and care they'd perfected over the years. "Everything's perfect," Sarah beamed, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. She took a moment to absorb the scene before her, the fruits of their labor transforming her everyday space into something magical. "All right, what's next?" Natalie asked, eager to keep the momentum going. "Let's do a final walkthrough, make sure we haven't missed anything," Sarah suggested, knowing full well her friend's penchant for perfection would leave no stone unturned. They moved through the bakery, double-checking each placement of cutlery and glassware, ensuring that every corner sparkled with anticipation. Their chatter was light, peppered with giggles and shared glances that spoke volumes of their deep connection. The sounds of laughter lingered in the air, an echo of the joy that these women found in one another's company. Sarah glanced around at the faces she knew so well, each one a cherished chapter in her life story. "Thanks, guys," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Are you kidding?" "We wouldn't miss it for the world," Danielle said, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. "Besides, who would pass up an opportunity to taste your baking?" Natalie added with a wink, eliciting a round of approving nods. "True," Lola agreed, her assertiveness softened by a fond smile. "But it's more than that. It's about being here for each other, through thick and thin, through weddings and showers," Rachel chimed in, gesturing around the room. "Through all the layers, just like a cake," Sarah concluded. Chapter 2. Lola sat behind her mahogany desk, the glow from her computer screen casting a soft light over her features. Her office was quiet, save for the muted clicks of her mouse as she scrolled through a digital album, each photo a snapshot from years past. She paused at a picture taken during senior prom. There she was, beaming in a ruffled dress that emphasized her curvy figure, flanked by her 4 closest friends. Her dark eyes lingered on the image, and a half-smile graced her lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The scent of the leather-bound law books that lined her shelves mingled with the faint aroma of the Tex-Mex lunch that still lingered from earlier. As successful as she was, having climbed the legal ladder with a relentless drive, Lola felt a yearning to reconcile the woman in the photographs with the one reflected back at her in the courtroom's polished surfaces. With a determined click, Lola minimized the photos and opened a new browser tab. It was time for change, she decided. She began researching personal trainers in the small Texas town, her fingertips drumming a staccato rhythm against the wooden edge of the desk. Profile after profile flickered across the screen, testimonials filled with fitness jargon she only half understood, but none seemed to resonate with her, until she came across Tom Carter. "Transformations are my specialty," his profile read, accompanied by before and after pictures that were nothing short of remarkable. But it wasn't just the physical changes that caught her eye. It was the vibrant smiles on the faces of his clients, the looks of genuine accomplishment. They spoke of a deeper metamorphosis, one that aligned with the kind of comprehensive renewal Lola longed for. Tom's credentials were impressive, sure, but it was the warmth that seemed to emanate from his written words that drew her in. He spoke of balance, of patience, of finding joy in the journey, concepts that resonated with Lola's own philosophies in life and law. And those final lines, where he mentioned helping others face their past while building their future, almost seemed to reach out through the screen to her. Before doubt could claw its way into her resolve, Lola clicked on the contact button. Lola's fingers hovered over the sleek surface of her phone, its black screen a silent challenge. The office around her was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of voices from the hallway. With a deep breath that did little to steady her racing heart, she tapped the screen to life, bringing up Tom Carter's number. "Change is just a call away," she murmured to herself, borrowing courage from the motivational poster pinned above her desk. The clock ticked on, each second stretching out as she hesitated, her career-driven mind wrestling with personal vulnerability. She pressed call, the beep in her ear an unassuming herald of new beginnings. "Hello, Tom Carter speaking," came the immediate, buoyant response. His voice was a smooth blend of strength and warmth, like a comforting sip of hot cocoa after a wintry evening stroll through the small town square. "Hi, this is Lola Sanchez. I found your profile online," Lola said, her words threading the line between her usual courtroom assertiveness and the softness of hope. "I'm interested in hiring a personal trainer." "Fantastic. It's great to hear from you, Lola," Tom replied. "Helping people achieve their fitness goals is what I love doing. Tell me, what are you looking to accomplish?" As Lola listened to the genuine interest in Tom's tone, her nerves began to unravel. This wasn't just another transaction, it felt like a step towards something far more nourishing. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her hand steadying. "I'm looking forward to starting this journey." Lola Sanchez pushed open the door to the local gym, her pulse quickening as the scent of rubber mats and the faint tang of citrus cleaning solution mingled in the air. The familiar cacophony of clanking weights and the rhythmic whir of treadmills hummed like a backdrop to her mounting anticipation. She scanned the room, her gaze flitting past the rows of machines and the free weights section until it landed on him. Tom Carter stood across the gym, haloed by the morning sunlight streaming through the high windows. He was a vision of dedication, his toned arms folded across his chest, his workout attire hugging his chiseled physique like a glove. As if sensing her presence, he lifted his head, and their eyes met. A friendly smile unfurled across Tom's face, softening the rugged edges of his neatly trimmed beard. He strode toward her with an ease that belied the strength evident in each step. "Hey, Lola, it's great to finally meet you in person," Tom greeted, his voice the same warm timbre she remembered from the phone call. His handshake was firm yet gentle, a balance that echoed his confident demeanor. "Likewise, Tom," Lola replied, finding her nervousness melting away under the heat of his easygoing charm. "I'm ready to see what I've signed up for." "Let's get started then," Tom said with an encouraging nod. He led her toward a quieter corner of the gym where they could talk and work uninterrupted. First, Tom guided her through a series of fitness assessments. He wrapped the tape measure around her waist with care, ensuring it was snug but not tight, a level of consideration that didn't go unnoticed by Lola. The beep of the body composition monitor punctuated the quiet as he took note of her metrics, his brow furrowed in concentration. "All right, let's discuss your goals," Tom said, his tone professional yet laced with empathy. Lola appreciated how he listened intently, his dark eyes reflecting a genuine interest in her words. She spoke of her desire be in shape for the first time in her life. She didn't mention Sarah's wedding being her catalyst, but she wasn't sure he'd care anyway. "Having clear goals is essential, but we also want to enjoy the journey getting there," Tom assured her, his words echoing the patience of someone who understood the winding nature of personal progress. "We'll take it one step at a time." Lola's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor of the gym as she followed Tom to a secluded corner decked out with weights and resistance bands. The scent of lemon-scented disinfectant mingled with the faint muskiness of exertion that clung to the air, a reminder of the hard work that awaited her. "First things first," Tom began. "We're going to focus on setting achievable goals. It's about consistent effort, not overnight miracles." Lola watched him demonstrate a proper squat, his muscles rolling under his skin like quiet thunder. "Think of it like your cases, Lola. You prepare, you execute, and you adapt. Fitness is a marathon, not a sprint." "Marathons sound just as exhausting," Lola quipped, earning a chuckle from Tom. "True, but life's a balance, right? Work, play, health, it's all about finding harmony. He handed her a pair of dumbbells, their weight cool and solid in her grasp. Let's find yours. Under Tom's guidance, Lola began her regimen, lunging and lifting with determination etched into her features. Each movement pushed her, the burn in her muscles a fierce testimony to her body's capabilities and limits. Easy does it, Tom encouraged, his presence a steady beacon. Perfect form trumps everything. Quality over quantity. Feels more like torture over comfort, Lola gasped, between sets, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her, curling into a smile. But think of the post-workout tacos we've earned, Tom teased. Food is my one true love, Lola confessed, the barbell in her hands rising and falling with each confession. It's loyal, always there when I need it. Then let's make it a love triangle, food, fitness, and fun. Tom's eyes sparkled with mirth as he counted her reps. Sounds scandalous, Lola retorted, the strain on her face softening into amusement. Only the best kind of scandal, he agreed, nodding approvingly as she completed her set. Great job. You're stronger than you know. The clock on the wall ticked away, carving time into slices of effort and recovery. With every tick, Lola's confidence bloomed, her laughter now punctuating the space between strained breaths. All right, last one, Tom announced, pointing to the mat. Give me everything you've got left. Prepare to be amazed, Lola declared, half joking, half serious, as she positioned herself for the final exercise. Her arms trembled, but her resolve did not waver. Tom's steady gaze urged her to believe in her own strength. As the session drew to a close, Lola collapsed onto the mat, a laugh escaping her lips, a sound as bright and hopeful as the morning sun streaming through the gym windows. Tom extended a hand to help her up, his grip firm and warm. See? You survived, he said, grinning. Thanks to you, Lola replied, her heart still racing from the exertion. I might actually start to enjoy this. Enjoyment is key, Tom affirmed, and remember, it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey. Your journey. Lola nodded, her chest swelling with a sense of pride she hadn't felt since, ever. As they scheduled their next session, she knew she was on the cusp of something transformative, not just in body, but in spirit. And with Tom by her side, she was ready to run the distance. Lola steadied her breath, the burn in her thighs a fierce reminder of muscles long ignored. She watched as Tom demonstrated the proper squat form, his movements precise and fluid, a stark contrast to the awkwardness she felt in her skin. As she mimicked his technique, a wave of self-consciousness washed over her. The gym mirror reflected back an image that didn't align with the confident lawyer she was in the courtroom. Keep your back straight, Lola, Tom's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. You're doing great. Her knees wobbled on the ascent, and she bit her lip, frustration nipping at the edges of her resolve. Hey. Tom's voice was softer now, but no less firm. It's not about how you start, it's about getting better each time. You've got this. She looked into his eyes, finding a belief there that she struggled to summon for herself. His encouragement was the gentle nudge she needed, and slowly, her focus shifted from the mirror to the rhythm of her movements, to the sensation of growing strength in place of hesitation. As the session continued, Lola found herself syncing with the cadence of the workout. Each squat became less about the weight she was lifting and more about the power she was building. A bead of sweat traced a path down her temple, a tangible sign of effort that she welcomed rather than shunned. Look at that, Tom exclaimed, as she completed a particularly challenging set. Your form is improving already. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, and she allowed it to bloom fully. With every subsequent rep, her confidence swelled just a little more, her earlier insecurities shrinking away. She was beginning to see her body not as a collection of imperfections, but as an instrument capable of change, of achievement. Last one, make it count, Tom encouraged, standing by her side. She pushed up with all the energy she had left, locking her legs and holding the position. It was a tiny triumph, but it was hers, and it sparked something within her, a flare of determination that promised this was only the beginning. Wow, I actually did it, Lola breathed out, setting the weights down with a clatter that echoed her burgeoning self-assurance. Of course, you did, Tom replied, his pride in her clear. You're stronger than you think. As they wrapped up, dispensing with the equipment and wiping down mats, Lola couldn't help but feel that this small Texas town, with its wide skies and close-knit community, was the perfect backdrop for transformations of all kinds. Lola's legs trembled as she took her final steps on the treadmill, the belt whirring beneath her slowing pace. She reached out to grip the handles, a lifeline as her breath came in labored gasps, and hit the stop button. The machine wound down to a halt, and with it, a profound silence seemed to fill the gym, a stark contrast to the pounding of her heart against her ribcage. Her skin glistened with sweat, droplets tracing paths down her flushed cheeks like hard-earned tears of triumph. With each heaving breath, she felt the exhaustion that seeped into every fiber of her being, but alongside it rode an exhilaration that buzzed through her veins. She swiped a towel across her brow and caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were bright, alight with something that had been dormant before this moment. It was more than satisfaction, it was the realization that she had pushed beyond the invisible barriers she had once set for herself. Good work today, Lola. You pushed through every challenge I threw at you, Tom said, his voice a soothing balm to her worn-out muscles. He stood beside her, holding a water bottle out for her to take. That kind of determination is going to get you where you want to be. She took the bottle with a nod. Thanks, Tom, she finally managed, the sound scratchy but sincere. I didn't know I had it in me. Most people don't, until they're tested, he replied, his smile not just a curve of lips but genuine pride. His dark eyes shone with admiration, reflecting the potential he saw in her. You've got a fire in you, Lola. And we're just getting started. Her chest swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude, her earlier doubts dissolving like sugar in hot tea. Around them, the hum of treadmills and clink of weights grounded her in the reality of the small-town gym. Here, time seemed to slow down, moments measured in reps and sets rather than minutes and hours. Can't wait to see what you have planned for our next session, she said, allowing a playful smirk to dance on her lips, despite the lingering fatigue. Trust me, you'll love it, or maybe hate it just a little bit, Tom teased, his laughter mingling with hers, a harmonious sound that seemed to resonate with the promise of new beginnings. They parted ways at the gym entrance. As Lola made her way home, the scents of barbecue and fresh-cut grass filled the air, reminders of the simplicity and warmth of the place she called home. Tonight, she would rest, but tomorrow was another day, a day brimming with possibility and the sweet anticipation of becoming stronger, inside and out. Lola's breath steadied as she slumped onto a bench, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat radiating from her body. She swiped a bead of sweat from her brow and turned to Tom, who was collecting the scattered dumbbells with the ease of someone well-versed in the rhythms of gym life. Hey, Tom, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. I just want to say, thank you. You've been incredibly patient and supportive. He paused, a smile playing on his lips as he looked over at her. That's what I'm here for, Lola. Seeing you push through today's session, it makes it all worthwhile. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, and it bolstered her spirits. The ache in her muscles seemed like a small price to pay for the sense of achievement that now coursed through her veins. About our next session, she ventured, her curiosity piqued. What's the plan? He said, setting down the weights and walking over to join her. We'll be stepping it up a notch. A bit more cardio, maybe some circuit training. Sound good? Sounds like a challenge, she admitted, but the sparkle in her eye betrayed her eagerness to meet it head-on. Trust me, you're more than ready for it. He offered her a bottle of water, his fingers brushing against hers, a fleeting touch that sent an unexpected jolt through her. Lola took a long drink, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. As the water quenched her thirst, so did Tom's encouragement quench her lingering self-doubt. All right then, bring it on, she said, a playful bravado lacing her words. See you Thursday? He asked, already anticipating the progress they would make together. Thursday it is, she confirmed. As she watched Tom return to his duties, a sense of camaraderie settled within her. They were in this together, coach and trainee, each with their own battles, yet united by a common goal. Lola left the gym with a new rhythm in her step, the fading Texas sun wrapping her in its warm embrace. She pondered the transformation ahead, not just of her body, but of her heart and mind. What would unfold between her and the man who saw potential in every one of her efforts? The streets of her small town whispered possibilities, and as she walked, the scent of smoked brisket from a nearby diner mingled with the crisp evening air, anchoring her to this moment of change. Her journey had only just begun, and she couldn't wait to discover where it would lead. The soft rustle of lavender fabric filled the small room at the back of the church where the 5 friends had gathered. Lola smoothed down her dress, adjusting the drape of the chiffon before turning to Sarah, who stood there radiant in her white gown, a stark contrast against their pastel hues. "Can you believe it?" Danielle whispered, a twinkle of excitement lighting up her brown eyes as she clasped her hands together. "I can't," Sarah admitted, her auburn curls framing her face like a halo. "It feels surreal." "Mommy, look." Rachel's daughter, the flower girl, beamed up at them, holding out her basket as if presenting a treasure. "Sweetheart, you're going to be the most beautiful flower girl ever," Rachel said, her voice warm with maternal pride, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. Natalie smiled. "You'll steal the show before Sarah even walks down the aisle." "Hey now, I'm supposed to be the star today," Sarah playfully interjected, winking at the little girl, who giggled in response. "All right ladies, let's get in formation," Lola said. They instinctively formed a circle around Sarah, their bodies swaying slightly to the melody of an unseen organ, practicing its scales. "Sarah, you've baked your way into everyone's hearts, including Jake's," Lola said as she reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand. "And today, you're going to walk down that aisle and into marriage. Make sure to leave some room for us at the bakery, though," Natalie chimed in. "Of course. It's not just my big day, it's ours," Sarah replied. "Group hug?" Rachel suggested, her caring smile contagious. "Group hug," they echoed, leaning in. They held each other tight, the bond of their friendship as comforting as the soft hum of the air conditioning against the Texas heat. "Sarah Thompson, you are the epitome of warmth," Danielle added softly, her writer's mind always searching for the right words. "Jake is one lucky man. Lucky enough to make a romance writer envious," Danielle continued, a playful lilt in her voice. "Okay, enough mushy stuff," Sarah laughed, dabbing at the corner of her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Let's do this." As the final blessing was bestowed upon the couple, a collective breath was released, and the church erupted into applause. Lola's lips curved into a smile that mirrored those of her friends. The wedding had unfolded flawlessly. Later, at the reception, the air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. As the evening wore on, Lola found herself swept up in the rhythm of the music, her body moving to the beat of salsa, a tribute to her heritage and a melody that resonated deep in her bones. "Vamos, mija, show them how it's done," Abuela called out, her voice rich with encouragement and mischief. Lola needed no further prompting, her hips swayed, and her feet tapped across the wooden floor. Unbeknownst to Lola, on the fringes of the dance floor stood Tom, his dark eyes tracing her every move. He watched Lola dance, captivated not only by her physical beauty but also by the infectious joy that seemed to radiate from her. She was a force of nature, confident, assertive, and utterly unaware of the effect she had on him. Tom leaned against a wooden pillar, his arms crossed over his chest, a half-smile playing on his lips. It wasn't just Lola's dancing that held his attention. It was the way her laughter mingled with the music, how her eyes sparkled brighter than the lights overhead, and how she threw her head back with a carefree abandon that made her seem free of the world's weight. Amid the festivities, the crowd parted for a moment, and their gazes inadvertently met. Lola's steps faltered for a heartbeat, a flush creeping up her neck as she registered Tom's presence. But then, with a grin, she turned back to her dance partner, her abuela, who deftly spun her around, bringing forth peals of laughter that drowned out the soft thump of Tom's heart. Lola watched the twinkling lights from the paper lanterns catch in Sarah's auburn hair as she prepared to make her grand exit from the reception. "Sarah," Lola called out softly, stepping through the clusters of well-wishers. Sarah turned, the layers of her white gown whispering against the polished wooden floor. Her eyes, bright with unshed tears and the promise of a future unfurling before her, met Lola's. can you believe it? Sarah's voice was a mixture of laughter and disbelief. Every second of it, Lola affirmed, her own voice threaded with the warmth of their friendship. They came together in an embrace that spoke volumes, the kind of hug that sealed memories and fortified hearts. Lola rested her chin on Sarah's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of cinnamon and sugar that seemed to cling to her friend like a signature. Jake is one lucky man, but then again, so are you, Lola whispered, pulling back just enough to look into Sarah's eyes. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Sarah, and I do not doubt that Jake will see to it that you have it. Sarah's smile bloomed, radiant and hopeful. Thank you, Lola. That means everything coming from you. Hey, I'm just stating the facts. Lola gave her a playful wink, a move that drew a joyful giggle from Sarah, a sound as comforting as the soft glow of the lanterns. Remember this moment, Lola urged, her hands cupping Sarah's cheeks gently. When times get tough, remember how you feel right now. I will, Sarah promised, her voice thick with emotion. And I'll be there when it's your turn, too. With another tight squeeze, Lola released her friend, stepping back to join the others and sending off the newlyweds under a shower of rose petals and cheers. As Sarah and Jake made their way through the crowd, hand in hand, the echoes of their laughter melded with the melodic chime of the old church bell, marking the hour and the beginning of a new chapter. Lola's gaze lingered on the departing couple until they were silhouettes against the backdrop of the starlit Texas sky. She felt a bittersweet pang, a cocktail of joy for her friend and a silent yearning for a love story of her own. But as the celebration around her continued, she knew anything was possible. And perhaps, just perhaps, her own dance toward happiness had already begun. Chapter 3. The midday sun cast a harsh glare on the asphalt as Lola Sanchez stepped out of the courthouse, her heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. The heat settled like a heavy blanket over her skin, but it did nothing to dampen the sharp focus in her dark eyes. With every step, her mind replayed the details of the case that had consumed her for weeks. Turning a corner, she found herself face to face with Officer Mike Reynolds, a seasoned police officer with a reputation for keen observation. He stood leaning against his patrol car, arms crossed, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his weathered features. Officer Reynolds, Lola greeted, offering a nod. I appreciate you meeting me outside your shift. Anything for justice, Miss Sanchez, he replied, tipping his hat slightly. They walked to a nearby bench, away from prying ears. As they sat, Lola leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Tell me again, from the top. What do we know happened that night? Mike glanced around before answering, his voice low and steady. Victim was last seen at the bar around 11 p.m. The bartender says she left alone, but the back alley security cam shows a figure following her out. He paused, his gaze meeting Lola's. Too grainy to make out who, though. Any other leads? Lola asked, her brow furrowing in frustration. Still working on it, Mike assured her. But I've got a hunch. It doesn't sit right, the way things were left at the scene. Too clean, like someone wanted us to find her. Thanks, Mike. Keep me posted. Every detail matters, she said, rising from the bench with renewed determination. Will do, he replied with a nod as they parted ways. Later that evening, Lola pushed open the door to El Jardin, the scent of spices and sizzling meat greeting her as warmly as the cozy ambience of the small Mexican restaurant. The laughter and chatter from a familiar table reached her ears before she even saw them, and a smile curved her lips. Hey, Lola, called Sarah from the table. The group made room for their friend, pulling up an extra chair between Natalie and Rachel. Evening, ladies, Lola greeted as she settled into the seat, her case momentarily forgotten as she entered the realm of her closest friends. Girl, you look like you could use a margarita, Danielle quipped, her brown eyes twinkling with mischief. Make that two, Lola agreed with a light laugh, signaling the waiter. Rough day? Natalie inquired, her glasses reflecting the warm overhead lights as she studied Lola with concern. Let's just say justice is taking its sweet time, Lola sighed, accepting the drink that was set before her with a grateful nod to the waiter. Nothing you can't handle, I'm sure, Rachel chimed in supportively, her blonde hair catching the light as she leaned in. Speaking of handling, how are those feet, Nat? Lola teased, shifting the attention from her own trials. Surviving, just barely, Natalie chuckled, wiggling her toes within her sneakers. But enough about work. Let's enjoy our dinner, talk about something fun for a change. And just like that, the conversation turned to lighter topics, upcoming festivals, new recipes Sarah was trying at the bakery, and the latest book that had captured Danielle's heart. Plates of enchiladas, tacos, and chiles rellenos arrived, and the table became a symphony of shared plates and stories. Here's to friendship and good food, Danielle raised her glass, prompting a chorus of agreement. May they both always be plentiful, Lola added, the clink of their glasses punctuating the moment, a snapshot of camaraderie and resilience in the heart of their small Texas town. Lola forked a piece of spicy chicken onto her plate as the laughter subsided, a lull in the conversation offering a moment to steer the topic into new territory. The warmth of camaraderie had loosened her up, the glow from the string lights above mingling with the savory scents of cumin and cilantro. Okay, spill it, Lola, Sarah said. You've been dodging the question all night. Who's got you so dedicated to the gym lately? New Year resolution? Sort of, Lola grinned, wiping a stray dollop of salsa from the corner of her mouth. I've got myself a personal trainer. Tom Carter, he's something else. Ooh, tell us more. Danielle leaned forward, propping her chin on her hand. Let's just say I never knew a person could do so many squats and still walk the next day, Lola quipped, rolling her eyes but with a smile that betrayed her fondness for the challenge. Sounds intense, Rachel commented, reaching for the guacamole. Intense is an understatement, Lola continued, her voice adopting a playful groan. But Tom, he doesn't let up. Always pushing, always encouraging. It's like he sees more in me than I do sometimes. Sounds like someone has a little crush, Natalie teased, nudging Lola gently under the table. Maybe, Lola conceded, her cheeks flushing a shade that rivaled the vibrant hue of their tablecloth. But it's not just that. When I'm ready to give up, thinking I can't possibly do another rep, he's there, telling me I can. And somehow, I believe him. Nothing like a handsome man believing in you to make you feel powerful, Sarah winked. Exactly, Lola laughed, feeling a bubble of pride rise within her. He makes me feel unstoppable. The scent of fresh perspiration mixed with the tang of antiseptic gym wipes lingered in the air. Lola grimaced as she sank into another squat, muscles trembling with the strain. Tom stood before her, a pillar of strength, with his arms crossed over his chest, dark hair tousled from demonstrating proper form. Come on, Lola. You've got this, Tom encouraged, his deep voice grounding her effort. Drive through your heels. Up. That's it. Feels like my legs are about to mutiny, Lola huffed, pushing upward until she stood erect once again. Your legs are stronger than you think, Tom assured her, stepping closer to check her alignment. Remember why you're here. You want to win, in court and in life. I'm just here to remind you that you're already halfway there. Halfway feels like a lifetime away right now, Lola said, but the edges of her lips curled upwards. Every rep gets you one step closer, Tom responded, his gaze locking onto hers with unwavering confidence. You're not just training your body, Lola. You're sharpening your mind. Lola met his gaze, feeling a surge of determination. Then I guess we keep going. Exactly, Tom nodded, a proud smile gracing his features. Now, 5 more. Show me what you're made of, counselor. As she descended once more, Lola felt the weight of her ambition, not just to improve her physique but to meet the high bar she set for herself in every aspect of her life. With each rise and fall, she was not only sculpting her body but also carving out the version of herself she strived to be, resolute, formidable, unyielding. And with Tom by her side, she felt invincible. Lola's arms trembled as she grasped the cold steel of the pull-up bar, her knuckles whitening with the effort. Above her, the gym's fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a rhythmic glow that matched her labored breathing. Okay, give me one more, you've got this, Tom encouraged from below, his hands outstretched, ready to assist. Easy for you to say, Lola shot back between breaths, a playful glint in her eye. You're not the one dangling like a Christmas ornament. Hey, if it makes you feel better, I'm pretty sure you're the most festive ornament in here, Tom chuckled, his eyes crinkling in amusement. Lola managed a laugh, even as her muscles screamed in protest. She pulled herself up, inch by agonizing inch, until her chin crested the bar. The triumph was short-lived as she lowered herself back down, finally letting go to land softly on the padded floor. See? You did it, Tom said, clapping his hands in genuine admiration. Pure willpower. Willpower and an intense fear of looking like a piñata at the next office party, she quipped, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Speaking of parties, I never took you for the type who can do the salsa. I saw those moves at your friend's wedding, Tom remarked, leaning against a nearby weight rack. Huh. That wasn't salsa, that was pure survival instinct, Lola replied, her laughter mingling with his. When a song comes on and your abuela is giving you the eye, you dance or face the consequences. Note to self, never challenge you to a dance-off, Tom grinned, offering her a water bottle. Smart man, she accepted the bottle with a grateful smile, taking a long sip of the cool liquid. It was moments like these, the easy banter and shared laughter, that made the grueling workouts more bearable. All right, counselor, let's tackle the next challenge, Tom said, motioning toward a set of weights. Objection, Your Honor, Lola half-joked, but there was a spark of determination in her voice. Overruled, Tom countered with a mock sternness. Trust me on this one. As they moved to the next exercise, Lola eyed the weights with apprehension. She had never been particularly fond of deadlifts, and the amount of weight Tom had added looked daunting. Remember, it's all about the technique, Tom instructed, demonstrating the proper stance and movement. Keep your back straight, drive through your heels. Should have paid more attention in physics class, Lola muttered, positioning herself as he had shown. Gravity is just another opponent, and you're about to show it who's boss, Tom said. With a deep breath, Lola gripped the bar, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. She lifted, feeling the strain spread across her shoulders and down her legs. Halfway up, her body wavered, threatening to buckle under the pressure. Stay with it, Lola. You're stronger than you think, Tom's voice was steady, grounding. Damn right, I am, she gritted out, locking her core and completing the lift. As she set the weights down with a metallic clang, a rush of accomplishment flooded through her. Look at that, Tom beamed proudly. You're conquering every challenge I throw at you. Maybe I should start throwing some challenges your way, Lola teased, her chest heaving with exertion. Anytime, Tom said with a wink. I'm always up for a good challenge. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, there was a silent acknowledgement of the mutual respect that had flourished between them. Lola's heart thrummed with newfound confidence, not just in her physical strength, but in the unspoken promise of partnership that the future might hold. Lola dabbed at her forehead with a towel, catching a droplet of sweat before it could slide down the bridge of her nose. The gym's air conditioner hummed a steady tune that couldn't quite compete with the burning in her muscles or the heat radiating off Tom as he stood close by, tallying her progress on a clipboard. She could feel his eyes on her even when she didn't look up, a magnetic pull that made her heart skip. Great set, Tom murmured, handing her a water bottle. His fingers brushed hers, an electric charge crackling in the brief touch. Lola's pulse quickened, and she indulged in a swift glance at him, meeting his gaze. In his eyes, there was something more than professional pride, it was a spark, a silent conversation that lingered just a second too long to be casual. Thanks. Her voice was breathy, betraying the flurry of butterflies in her stomach. She took a generous sip, relishing the coolness as it contrasted against the warmth spreading across her cheeks. Let's take 5, yeah? Tom suggested, setting down the clipboard. He led her to a pair of benches where they could rest, his stride confident yet careful, as if every step was taken with her comfort in mind. As they caught their breath, Tom turned to her, folding his arms over his broad chest. You know, I've never seen someone so dedicated, he said, his voice low and genuine. It's like you're not just lifting weights, you're lifting everyone's expectations, including your own. Lola smiled, touched by his insight. I guess I am. But sometimes, I wonder if I'm trying to prove something, to myself more than anyone else. Is it working? Most days. She hesitated, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. But sometimes, I fear that all I'm doing is chasing some impossible standard. That no matter how hard I push, it won't be enough. Enough for what? Enough to be happy, I suppose. Lola let out a sigh, feeling an unexpected vulnerability. Hey, Tom said softly, reaching out to place a reassuring hand on her knee. It was warm, solid, real. Happiness isn't a finish line, Lola. It's the moments like these, the journey we're on. And for what it's worth, I think you're more than enough. Her heart fluttered under his touch, and she met his gaze again. This time, she allowed herself to look at him, the sharp jawline softened by his beard, the depth in his dark eyes, and the faintest smile playing on his lips. There was earnestness there, an echo of past struggles that resonated with her own. Tell me about your journey, Tom, she urged gently, leaning in. What are you searching for? He exhaled, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. A second chance, I guess. To make things right, starting with helping people find their strength. Like I found mine, through training? Through realizing that our scars, physical or not, are just part of our story, they don't define us. Lola nodded, absorbing his words. Here was a man who understood the grind of self-improvement. Their shared understanding wove an invisible thread between them, pulling them closer. Thank you, Tom, she whispered, feeling a surprising sense of intimacy in this quiet corner of the gym. For seeing the strength in me, even when I'm not sure it's there. Always, he promised, giving her knee a gentle squeeze, before withdrawing his hand. She missed the warmth immediately but held on to the flicker of connection, letting it fuel her resolve. Sweat glistened on Lola's forehead as she hoisted the kettlebell, her arms trembling with the effort of the final lift. Tom stood by her side, his dark eyes tracking her every movement with an intensity that spurred her on. Last one, Lola. You've got this, he encouraged, his voice a steady drumbeat in time with her racing heart. She exhaled sharply, pushing through the burn that screamed in her biceps, and completed the set. Dropping the weight, she stumbled back into Tom's waiting arms. He steadied her, his palms warm against the coolness of her damp skin. Look at you, he said, pride etched across his features. 3 months ago, you couldn't do half that weight. Lola laughed breathlessly, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. It feels like my arms are going to fall off, but I did it. They moved through the gym, transitioning from weights to cardio. Lola's sneakers pounded the treadmill, keeping pace with the beat of a song only she could hear. Tom adjusted the speed, challenging her, always pushing just beyond what she thought possible. She felt the change, not just in the mirror but in the ease of her movements, the newfound lightness in her step. See? What did I tell you? The stamina of a marathon runner, he teased, jogging effortlessly alongside her. Huh. More like a marathon watcher, Lola joked between breaths, grateful for the laughter that made the time pass quicker. As the days turned into weeks, the montage of their training sessions blurred together, the shared glances over protein shakes, the side-by-side stretches that lingered a little longer each time, the synchronicity of their routines that felt almost like a dance. One evening, after a particularly grueling workout, they collapsed onto the plush blue mats, chests heaving in unison. The gym was quiet now, the clamor of daytime activity replaced by the hushed whispers of twilight. Ever have those moments where you feel you're not enough? Lola asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze was fixed on the ceiling, avoiding the vulnerability that clawed its way to the surface. Of course, Tom replied softly, turning his head to look at her, we all do. But you are more than enough, Lola. She rolled onto her side to face him, the proximity sending a current through the air. It's hard sometimes, you know? In court, I'm fierce, unbeatable. But when it comes to this, she gestured to herself, I see every flaw. Listen to me, Tom said earnestly, reaching out to tilt her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. You are strong, capable, and beautiful. And not despite those so-called flaws, but because of them. They make you who you are. Lola's heart skipped a beat at the sincerity in his eyes, a molten chocolate gaze that melted her insecurities away. His words wrapped around her like a blanket, comforting and warm. She bit her lip, holding back the swell of emotions. "Thank you, Tom. For believing in me," she murmured, feeling a bond that went deeper than muscle and sinew, one that was etched in trust and mutual respect. "Always," he smiled, his admiration for her evident in the unwavering support he offered, not just as a trainer, but as someone who cherished her spirit. As the gym lights dimmed, signaling the end of another day, they rose to leave, stepping out into the balmy Texas evening. The taste of progress was sweet on her tongue, a flavor she'd savor until their paths crossed again in the morning's light. Lola's breath came in ragged gasps, her limbs trembling with the exertion of the final, grueling set of lunges. Tom stood close, his hand lightly resting at the small of her back, a silent pillar of strength. The gym was quiet now, save for the echo of their synchronized breathing and the soft whirring of a ceiling fan above. "Last one, Lola. You've got this," Tom encouraged, his voice a soothing balm against the burn in her muscles. She sank down into the lunge, determination etched onto her features, and rose again with a triumphant exhale. "Done," she declared, a bead of sweat trailing down her temple. "More than done, you conquered it," Tom replied, pride lacing his words as he handed her a towel. Their fingers brushed, a jolt of electricity snapping between them. Lola's heart hammered against her ribcage, not just from the workout but from the intensity of his touch. "Thanks to you," she said, dabbing at her forehead. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken connection that hummed like the lingering Texas heat. "Only guiding you, Lola. The strength, that's all you," Tom murmured, stepping closer. His gaze dropped to her lips for a fleeting moment before meeting her eyes again, a silent question hovering in the space between them. "Guiding me a lot lately," she teased, aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating off his body, the faint scent of citrus on his skin. "Anytime," he replied, his smile tugging at something deep within her. They stood there, in the dimming light of the gym, the world outside fading into insignificance. It was just the two of them, trainer and trainee, yet the titles seemed inadequate to describe the crescendo of emotions that swirled around them. "Want to grab some food?" Tom asked after a moment, breaking the spell. "I know a place that does the best barbacoa tacos." "Sounds perfect," Lola agreed, her stomach seconding the motion with a timely growl. They both chuckled, the sound mingling and dissipating into the evening air. As they walked out together, shoulder to shoulder, their hands brushed once more. This time, Tom let his fingers linger against hers, a touch so light yet laden with promise. Lola's pulse quickened, her skin tingling where he touched her. "Race you to the car," she suggested, a playful spark in her eye. "You're on," Tom grinned, accepting the challenge. They took off, laughter spilling into the twilight, leaving behind the weights and benches. As they reached the car, breathless and flushed, their hands met again over the handle of the passenger door. This time neither pulled away, allowing the contact to stretch out, an electric current connecting them. "Looks like it's a tie," Tom said, his voice low. "Or maybe we both won," Lola countered, her heart skipping a beat as she gazed up into his dark eyes, which held a depth she longed to explore. "Maybe we did," he agreed, his thumb caressing her knuckles in a tender dance. Their eyes locked, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Whatever it was that was happening between them, Lola couldn't wait to find out. Chapter 4. The sizzle of the grill and the rich, heady aroma of barbacoa filled the air as Lola and Tom found themselves perched on mismatched stools at a rustic outdoor eatery. A canopy of string lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over the small, checker-clothed tables. The small town's charm was not lost on either of them as they leaned into the casual ambience of the place, a welcome break from their respective hustles. "2 barbacoa tacos each, poor favor," Lola said to the waitress with a smile that carried the ease of her heritage, her dark eyes twinkling under the soft light. "Make it 3 for me," Tom added with a boyish grin. As the plates arrived, piled high with tender, slow-cooked meat wrapped in soft corn tortillas, topped with cilantro and diced onions, the pair dove in with a gusto that only authentic Tex-Mex could inspire. An hour slipped away like minutes, marked by the rhythmic coming and going of diners around them. As the initial rush of hunger subsided, Tom leaned back, wiping his mouth with a napkin, his gaze settling on Lola with a mix of curiosity and admiration. So, tell me about your law practice, he ventured, the question hanging between them like an invitation to reveal more than just the mechanics of her job. Lola paused, setting down her taco with a deliberateness that matched her approach to life. It's been my passion since I can remember, she began, her voice carrying the confidence that had navigated her through courtrooms and board meetings. I'm a prosecuting attorney. I deal with criminal charges. Tom nodded, absorbing her words. The earnestness in her tone spoke volumes about her dedication. Sounds like it can be pretty intense, he observed, watching as Lola's face softened. It is, she admitted, allowing herself a rare moment of candor. But when you manage to get justice for a victim, there's nothing quite like it. Her hands gestured animatedly as she spoke, mirroring the fervor that fueled her career. That's how I feel about my training. Your dedication's inspiring, she said, leaning forward, elbows on the weathered wooden table. What about you, though? How did you find your calling as a personal trainer? Tom's gaze dropped for a moment, his hands folding over each other as if bracing himself against a memory. When he looked up again, his eyes held a depth that drew Lola in, a silent invitation to witness a sliver of his soul. It started with my dad, he began, his voice carrying the weight of an untold story. He passed away from a heart attack when he was just 42. I was still in high school. The edges of his mouth twitched downward, a brief battle between composure and raw emotion playing out across his features. Tom, I'm so sorry, Lola murmured, her own heart clenching in empathy. He offered a half-smile, appreciative of her concern but eager to continue. Thanks, Lola. It was tough, you know? He was this larger-than-life figure to me, and then suddenly, he was gone. The air around them seemed to still, the usual bustle of the small town fading into the background as if giving them space to navigate through the past. Watching him go like that, without any warning, it changed me. I realized how fragile life is, how quickly it can all be taken away. He paused, his voice steadying with resolve. I made a promise to myself that day. I wanted to help people live healthier, longer lives. To maybe prevent another kid from losing their dad too soon. Lola reached out, her hand brushing against his. Nobody should have to go through that kind of loss, she agreed softly. In the shared space of their understanding, something shifted, their bond was fortified by the exchange of pains and aspirations. From there, I got certified, learned everything I could about fitness and nutrition, and here I am. His hand turned under hers, a firm squeeze acknowledging the gravity of his journey. Helping others be their best selves, it's more than a job. It's my way of honoring him. Lola smiled, a surge of admiration warming her from the inside out. She saw not just the personal trainer before her, but the man who transformed his grief into a beacon of hope for others. The scent of freshly baked bread and a hint of cinnamon lingered in the air, weaving through the cozy warmth of Sarah's bakery. The comforting aroma enveloped Sarah and Lola as they sat tucked away at their favorite small table by the window, each cradling a mug of steaming coffee. Sunlight spilled through the panes, painting patterns on the checkered tablecloth and casting a soft glow on their conversation. Girl, you can't tell me that these lattes aren't a little slice of heaven, Sarah said with a chuckle, her auburn hair catching the light as she leaned back in her chair, her curvy figure relaxed amidst the homey charm of her own making. Lola smiled, the robust flavor of the coffee mingling with the sweetness of the bakery's ambience, the space as warm and inviting as Sarah's personality. She took another sip, savoring the blend of boldness and comfort, much like the companionship she found in her friend. Definitely the best in town, Lola agreed, her dark eyes reflecting the swirls of steam rising from her cup. In this quaint setting, her usually assertive demeanor softened, allowing a rare vulnerability to surface. Sarah, sensing the shift, tilted her head slightly, her gaze filled with an empathetic warmth that had always been her second nature. She leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table, bridging the distance between them with earnest concern. So, Lola, how are things going with Tom? You two have been seeing a lot of each other lately. The question hung in the air, as tangible as the fragrance of vanilla from the display of cupcakes nearby. It was a simple inquiry, yet laden with the weight of unspoken thoughts and the tender beginnings of something new. Lola paused, her lips parting as if to respond, then closed again. She glanced out the window at the slow pace of their small Texas hometown, where every heartache and triumph were shared with an intimacy only a close-knit community could foster. Her relationship with Tom was still a delicate bud in the vast garden of possibility, and it was this tender uncertainty that Sarah had so keenly recognized. Lola murmured, buying herself a moment more with the rich aroma of her coffee before she would delve into the complexities of her heart. Her fingertip traced the delicate ceramic edge as Lola gathered her thoughts. The bakery hummed softly in the background, the occasional clink of dishes and murmur of patrons crafting a comforting symphony. But for now, Lola's world had narrowed to the space between her and Sarah, to the question that demanded an answer she wasn't sure she was ready to give. Sarah, Lola began, her voice a thread of uncertainty, I'm scared. She looked up from her coffee, finding solace in her friend's attentive gaze. With Tom, it's different. He's kind and patient, but there's this voice inside my head that keeps whispering, what if I'm not enough? Sarah's expression softened, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding that only years of friendship could cultivate. Lola, we all have those whispers, she said gently. It's like a stubborn dough that won't rise no matter how much you knead it. Lola couldn't help but smile at the analogy, so fitting amidst the scents of baked bread and sugar. It drew a line directly from Sarah's heart to hers, a baker weaving comfort through her craft, even in metaphor. Remember when I thought I'd never get over Tony? Lola's voice was steadier now, the words flowing more freely. I built these walls, Sarah. High ones. And now, Tom comes along with his earnest eyes and that lopsided grin, and I'm just afraid that if I let him in, if I truly open up, those walls might crumble and I'll be left exposed. Sarah reached across the table, a wordless gesture that spoke volumes. Her nod was one of empathy. You've always been brave, Lola. Braver than most. But even the bravest can fear the unknown. Remember, feeling vulnerable doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Lola took in Sarah's words, letting them swirl around her mind like the steam rising from their coffees. The warmth from her friend's support seeped into her, a comforting embrace without touch. In this small Texas town, where every joy and sorrow was shared, Lola found strength in the understanding that doubts were universal, a common thread binding them all. Thank you, she whispered, a new resolve flickering in her chest. For listening. For being here. The tightness in her heart eased, giving way to a sense of companionship that fortified her resolve to face the uncertainties ahead. Love is quite the journey, Sarah started, her voice soft yet laced with strength. For me, it was like perfecting a recipe. It took trial and error, and more than a few burnt edges. Lola's eyes followed the comforting motion of Sarah's thumb drawing small circles on her skin, her words seeping into Lola's consciousness. Each heartbreak, each disappointment, Sarah continued, they were ingredients I never thought I'd need. But they brought me closer to understanding myself, to recognizing what I truly wanted in a partner. Then came Jake, Sarah smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with the memory. With him, I learned that love isn't about changing your recipe to fit someone else's taste. It's about finding someone who savors the unique blend of flavors you bring to the table. Sure, there's a fear of getting hurt again, Sarah acknowledged, squeezing Lola's arm reassuringly. But there's also the possibility of something wonderful, something that makes all the past trials worth it. Lola's gaze locked onto Sarah's earnest expression, seeing in her friend not just the bakery owner she admired, but a kindred spirit. In that moment, Lola understood that her fears, while valid, were not insurmountable barriers. They were signposts, guiding her toward a deeper understanding of herself and what she yearned for in love. Thank you, Sarah, Lola said, her voice imbued with gratitude and a burgeoning sense of hope. Your journey, it gives me courage. She shook her head. But what if I'm not ready? I mean, what if, her fears were an old refrain, one she'd sung to herself too many times. Then you start by being ready to try, Sarah cut in. Her eyes sparkled with conviction. Love isn't about being ready, it's about being open to the journey. The words wrapped around Lola like a warm shawl, comforting yet empowering. In the center of the table, their coffee cups sent up wisps of steam, dancing together before disappearing into the air, transient, but beautiful while they lasted. Leap, Lola, Sarah urged, her tone imbued with a wisdom that seemed born from the very walls of the small town they called home. Trust yourself. Trust him. After all, isn't that what building something real is all about? It was as if Sarah had unlocked something within her, something Lola had kept hidden beneath layers of legal briefs and courtroom victories. With each beat of her heart, she felt a surge of strength, the kind that comes from recognizing one's own worth. Okay, Lola whispered at first, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. Okay, I can do this. I will do this. She sat up straighter, her posture mirroring her internal shift. Remember, your past, it's just a story you tell yourself, Sarah said, her gaze steady. And stories can be rewritten. Thank you, Sarah. Seriously, Lola said, a smile curving her lips, the first genuine smile she'd felt in a long time. It was as though she could taste the sweetness of potential, a flavor far more enticing than any past bitterness. Anytime, Sarah replied, her smile a reflection of the bond they shared. Chapter 5. Lola was a whirlwind of motion in the corner of the small-town gym, dark hair pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail that swung with each jarring step she took. Sweat glazed her forehead, tracing a path down to meet the curve of her cheeks before losing itself in the fabric of her tank top. Come on, Lola, you've got this. Push through, she muttered to herself, her breaths coming out in sharp gusts as she powered through the last few minutes of her intense cardio session. Every muscle fiber seemed to burn with protest, but Lola's eyes were alight with an unyielding fire. The burn was just another obstacle on her path, and Lola thrived on challenges, whether in court or in the gym. Her gaze flickered briefly to Tom Carter, who stood nearby, his arms crossed over his chest, a towel draped casually around his neck. His presence was both a comfort and a catalyst, pushing her to limits she hadn't known she could reach. He watched her with a steady, encouraging gaze, his own experiences etched into the lines of his face, a silent testament to a shared understanding that growth often came with discomfort. With every lift of the weights, Lola's arms trembled, not just from the strain but with the weight of her own ambitions. She wasn't just lifting iron, she was hoisting up her self-doubt and tossing it aside, rep by painstaking rep. Her curvy figure, a source of power and femininity, moved with a grace that belied the sheer force she exerted upon the cold metal in her grip. Almost there, Tom's voice reached her, low and steady, a grounding force amid the cacophony of clinking machines and the soft hum of conversation that filled the gym space. His words were unnecessary, Lola could feel the nearing end of her routine in every labored breath, but they were a welcome reminder that her efforts were seen, that her goals mattered. In the thick Texas heat that seeped even into the air-conditioned confines of the gym, Lola's determination never wavered. Each drop of perspiration that slid down her skin was a marker of time spent, of progress made. She would leave this place stronger than when she entered, fortified not just by the physical exertion but by the inner resolve that had become as much a part of her as her love for spicy food. As she completed her final set and set the weights down with a satisfying clunk, Lola allowed herself a brief moment of pride. Her chest heaved, drawing in the cool air, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. She wiped her brow with the back of her hand and met Tom's approving nod with a triumphant smile. She might be a formidable lawyer, accustomed to high stakes and fierce adversaries, but here in this gym, Lola fought a different kind of battle, a personal one. And step by sweat-soaked step, she was winning. Lola's breath hitched in her throat as she eyed the next challenge, a set of box jumps Tom had arranged. The boxes looked like small skyscrapers from where she stood, their heights taunting her resolve. All right, Lola, Tom's voice broke through her apprehension, as steady and reassuring as the warm, earthy scent of leather from the gym's equipment. You've got this. It's all about explosive power from your legs. Remember, it's just like making a strong argument in court, focus and follow through. Tom's analogy brought a wry smile to Lola's face, grounding her. With a nod, she bent her knees, the tension coiling in her muscles. The first jump, a shaky ascent that ended with her barely clinging onto the edge of the box, was far from the triumphant leap she envisioned. Frustration knotted in her stomach, an unwelcome guest that seemed to dine on her confidence. I don't know if I'm cut out for this, she exhaled sharply, her voice betraying the doubt that crept into the edges of her determination. Hey, Tom said, stepping closer, his own athletic prowess evident in the ease with which he moved. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that spoke volumes. You're one of the most tenacious people I've met. And you've never backed down from a fight, in or out of the courtroom. This is no different. Lola felt the weight of his gaze, the silent affirmation that he saw beyond the perspiration and momentary setbacks. He adjusted her stance subtly, his hands firm yet gentle on her hips. Shift your weight back a little. Use the strength in your core, it's there, I promise you. Another attempt, and this time, Lola's feet landed squarely atop the box. A surge of triumph rushed through her veins, though it was quickly tempered by the sight of the higher box awaiting her. See? What did I tell you? Tom's grin was infectious, bolstering her spirits. Every rep is a step forward. You're stronger than you think, Lola. Okay, let's do this, she said, the familiar flare of competition lighting within her. She squared her shoulders, offering a nod that was both a thank you and a challenge to herself. Remember, you're not just jumping, you're claiming the space above you, Tom instructed. His words lingered in her mind as she approached the next box, a formidable opponent. She faltered once, then twice, each failed attempt chipping away at her composure. Yet, with Tom's guidance, she recalibrated. Your form is good, Tom assured her, his presence a steadying force. Just trust yourself. You can do this. With a deep breath scented with the tang of iron and rubber mats, Lola made her third attempt. Time stretched out as she propelled herself upward, the encouragement in Tom's voice giving wind to her leap. Her feet met the top of the box, and a small victory unfurled within her chest. Si se puede, she exclaimed, a mantra of capability that echoed louder than her pounding heart. There was more work to be done, more heights to conquer, but for now, Lola basked in the glow of overcoming what once seemed insurmountable. Panting, Lola gripped the cool steel of the barbell, her knuckles as white as the chalk dusting her palms. The weight loomed above her like a silent judge, daring her to defy gravity once more. As she steadied her stance, her mind teetered on the edge of an all-too-familiar precipice. Each lift is a step up the courthouse stairs, she murmured to herself. Ready for another? Tom's voice broke through the cascade of doubt threatening to engulf her. Let's do it, she replied with a brittle determination that belied the tempest within. With each hoist of the barbell, her muscles screamed, mirroring the chorus of insecurities that whispered incessantly in her ears. You're not strong enough, they hissed. You're only fooling yourself. The weights became heavier with every repetition, as if laden with the weight of her self-doubt. Formidable, he praised, noting the tremor in her arms, but focusing on the strength behind it. Your perseverance, it's something few possess. As she completed her set, racking the bar back into place, her chest heaved with more than just exertion. It was fear that tightened around her lungs, a fear of failure that lingered long after the clatter of weights had faded. Hey, Tom said, catching her gaze with an intensity that seemed to peer into the core of her turmoil. I see that look, Lola. You're doing better than you think. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are champions. She offered a weak smile, grateful for the cliché, because sometimes, even platitudes could be a salve. But what if I'm not meant to be a champion? Lola. His tone turned earnest, commanding her attention. You walk into a courtroom ready to take down giants. Why should this be any different? You've got this fire in you, I've seen it. It's why you're going to succeed here, just like you do everywhere else. The sincerity in his voice was a balm to her frayed nerves, and slowly, a warmth began to spread through her veins, a warmth that tasted like victory, like her abuela's arroz con pollo on a Sunday afternoon, comfort and triumph blended into one. All right, then, she said, nodding, the first stirrings of belief taking root. Let's keep going. Lola gripped the cool steel of the dumbbell, her knuckles whitening with the effort. A bead of sweat traced a line down her temple, falling in time to the rhythmic thud of her heart. The weight seemed to mock her, heavy and unyielding, like the doubts that pressed upon her chest. She exhaled sharply, trying to lift it again, but her arms trembled, refusing to obey. Can't, she whispered to herself. I just can't. Hey, Tom said, stepping closer, his voice a soft counterpoint to her silent struggle. What's going on in that head of yours? Lola set the dumbbell down, the metallic clang final, resolute. It's like there's this wall, Tom. Every time I think I'm making progress, I hit it, hard. It's like I'm not built for change. Everyone's built for change, Lola. It's about finding the right tools to break through that wall. His hand gently guided her elbow, correcting her posture. Start with a smaller weight. It's not admitting defeat, it's understanding your journey. You're building, not breaking. She picked up the lighter weight, the texture familiar and less intimidating. You make it sound so simple. Only because it is, he smiled, adjusting her grip. One rep at a time. Focus on the form, not the finish line. Lifting the weight felt different this time, manageable. She found a rhythm, a steady pace that didn't overwhelm her senses or scream for surrender. See? Tom encouraged. You're moving forward. That's what counts. Moving forward, Lola echoed. Even if it's just an inch at a time. Especially then, he said, glancing at the clock on the wall. Because those inches add up to miles, and before you know it, you'll be where you want to be. Time, she mused, locking eyes with him as she completed another set. Just like preparing a case, right? Slow and steady. Exactly. And remember how satisfying it is when you win those cases? This will feel the same when you reach your goal. Winning, she repeated. She could almost taste the victory. Let's try another set, Tom suggested, his faith a tangible thing, wrapping around her like a warm shawl on a cool Texas evening. Okay, Lola agreed, breathing deeply. The weights rose and fell in her hands, each lift chipping away at her wall of doubt. With every rep, her confidence grew, fed by Tom's unwavering support. Lola steadied her breathing as she approached the squat rack, a fortress that had once been her nemesis. The cold metal felt familiar in her palms, no longer an adversary, but a challenge to be met. She positioned herself under the bar, the weight heavy across her shoulders, a burden she was now prepared to lift. Remember your form, Tom's voice was calm and steady beside her, feet shoulder-width apart. Drive through your heels. She nodded, focusing on the sensation of her feet rooted to the ground. With a deep inhale, she descended, her thighs parallel to the floor, her curves a testament to her strength. Exhaling, she rose back up with a power that surprised even her, completing the squat with a grace that surprised even her. Perfect, Lola. That's it. Tom cheered, his pride in her progress evident in his bright eyes. Couldn't have done it without you, she panted, racking the weight and stepping away. His belief in her was a spice that made every accomplishment taste sweeter. Trust me, you're doing the work, he countered with a grin, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. And it's paying off. Their smiles met, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they shared. All right, let's tackle those deadlifts now, Tom said, his tone shifting back to coach mode. You've been improving steadily. I think we can add another 5 pounds today. 5 pounds, she echoed, uncertainty flickering in her eyes for a moment before resolve chased it away. 5 pounds, he confirmed, his confidence unshakable. I've seen you lift groceries heavier than that. A laugh bubbled up from her chest, genuine and light. Only when Abuela sends me home with leftovers, she quipped. Exactly, Tom chuckled, setting up the barbell. So, let's show this iron what you're made of. Positioned before the loaded bar, Lola grasped it firmly. She pulled, the weight rising, a once daunting task, now a symbol of her tenacity. As the barbell clinked back onto the ground, a surge of satisfaction swelled within her. See? What did I tell you? Tom's voice was rich with encouragement as he stood by her side, watching her conquer each rep, with growing amazement. Guess I'm stronger than I thought, she replied, breathless yet beaming. Stronger than you give yourself credit for, he corrected gently, his gaze lingering on her in a way that sent warmth cascading through her veins. Thanks to you, she said, meeting his gaze. Thanks to us, he amended, and there was something in the way he said it that made her believe him. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts, a team united by a common goal. Every lift and stretch, every strained muscle and triumphant success, brought them closer. In the mirrored walls of the gym, Lola caught a glimpse not just of her own transformation, but of the partnership that was blooming beside her. Lola's fists clenched, each breath a fiery gust in her lungs as she steadied herself before the towering weight rack. The clink of metal was a call to arms, a siren song luring her to test the limits of her strength. With determination etched into the furrows of her brow, she exhaled sharply and hoisted the barbell from its rest. "Push through, Lola," Tom's voice cut through the grunt of exertion. Last set, best set. She could feel every fiber of her being straining, the weight and adversary that she was determined to conquer. Her muscles screamed with the strain. "Up. That's it." Tom encouraged, his presence a steady beacon as she completed her final rep. The barbell returned to its cradle with a satisfying clang, and Lola stood triumphant, chest heaving, a sheen of sweat gilding her skin. "Wow." She allowed herself a small smile, her eyes meeting Tom's in the reflection. "I did it." "Never doubted you for a second," he replied. As they began to cool down, stretching muscles that would surely remind them of today's victory come morning, Lola felt a seed of confidence take root deep within her. It was a feeling that extended beyond the walls of the gym, a sense of empowerment that she could carry into the courtroom, into every facet of her life. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice a soft murmur against the backdrop of clanking weights and muted conversations. "Thank yourself," he countered with a warm, knowing look. "You're the one doing the heavy lifting, in here and out there." Their laughter mingled, an easy sound that spoke of friendship and something quietly budding beneath the surface. As they gathered their things, the lingering ache in her limbs was a testament not only to the day's labor but also to the journey ahead. "Same time next week?" Tom asked, slinging his gym bag over his shoulder. "Wouldn't miss it," Lola responded, her heart skipping a beat at the thought of their next session together. Lola paused on her way out to her car, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling the pulse of the small town around her. Tom stepped out behind her. "I have an idea." Lola turned to him. "What kind of idea?" "I hope it's not to add another 50 pounds to my deadlift for next week." He chuckled. "No, not that. I was thinking it might be fun to test your new skills and strength in the wild. We could go kayaking on the San Marcos. I have Saturday free if you're interested." Lola smiled. "I'd love that. I'll bring a picnic lunch." "Sounds good. Can I pick you up at 7 on Saturday morning?" She nodded. "That would be fabulous." As she got into her car and drove away, she thought about how wonderful it would be to be alone for a whole day with Tom. She couldn't wait, but her shoulders were already groaning in protest. Chapter 6. The first tendrils of dawn crept through the slits in Lola's blinds, casting a warm glow over her as she stirred awake. The soft chirping of birds outside her window served as a gentle reminder of the day's adventure that awaited her. Today was about embracing the tranquility of the water. With a stretch that chased away any remnants of sleep, Lola swung her legs out from under the cozy duvet and planted her feet on the cool hardwood floor. She reveled in the quiet of the early morning, where the world seemed to pause just for her. Her preparations were meticulous yet filled with an undeniable enthusiasm. She selected a swimsuit that complemented her curvy figure, a testament to her newfound love for self-care, and topped it with shorts and a breathable tee. Each item was chosen for comfort but also with the knowledge that Tom's eyes would be upon her, appreciating the strength and confidence she wore as effortlessly as her outfit. The kitchen smelled of strong coffee and sunscreen, a combination that spoke to the promise of hours spent under the vast Texas sky. Lola packed her cooler with care, arranging sandwiches wrapped in wax paper alongside fresh fruit and a handful of decadent chocolate chip cookies she'd baked the night before. It was a picnic crafted to nourish and delight. As the clock's hands pointed to the agreed time, a knock resonated through the house, its rhythm confident and familiar. Lola grabbed the cooler, its weight a comfortable heft in her arms, and made her way to the door, her heartbeat keeping time with her steps. Tom stood there, punctual as the sunrise, his dark hair tousled perfectly, and his beard neatly trimmed. He was dressed casually in shorts and a fitted t-shirt that accentuated his chiseled physique, a silent nod to his dedication as a personal trainer. "Morning, Lola," he greeted. "Good morning, Tom," she replied, her own smile mirroring his. Together, they navigated the path to his truck, a dance of two people still learning the steps but eager to sway to the same rhythm. He took the cooler from her, placing it gently into the back seat. "Got everything?" Tom asked, his gaze sweeping over her as if committing the moment to memory. "Everything," Lola confirmed, feeling a sense of completeness she hadn't known she was seeking. They settled into the cab of the truck, the engine coming to life with a roar that signaled the start of their journey. As they pulled away from the curb, Lola glanced back at her home. Usually a fortress of solitude, today it watched over them, a silent witness to the beginning of something new and beautiful. Lola watched the storefronts of the small town blur into greenery, her senses drinking in the scent of fresh-cut grass mingling with the faint aroma of Tom's cologne. "Did you hear about the Hendersons' barn?" Tom asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Apparently, it's haunted. Sebastian swears he heard something when he was out there last week." Lola laughed, the sound light and unburdened. "Haunted? In this day and age? I'll believe that when I see Natalie walking into work without coffee. Sebastian has been reading too many horror novels." "Hey, stranger things have happened," he teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And speaking of strange, how did your case go on Thursday?" "The robbery case? Resolved, thankfully," she replied, the relief evident in her tone. Their conversation meandered like the winding roads they traveled, touching on everything from Danielle's latest romantic misadventure to Sarah's new confectionery creation that was taking the bakery by storm. It was a tapestry of topics, each thread revealing more of who they were, stitching together the fabric of an unexpected intimacy. The truck slowed to a crawl as they approached the river, its waters a shimmering ribbon beneath the sun. Tom maneuvered the vehicle off-road, bringing it to a gentle stop near the water's edge. They stepped out, the gravel crunching underfoot, and Tom walked around to the back of the truck to lower the tailgate. "Here we are, the mighty San Marcos River," he announced, gesturing grandly toward the river, which sparkled with inviting clarity. "Looks perfect," Lola said, her voice imbued with genuine appreciation for the serene landscape before them. Together, they reached for the kayak, its vibrant hue a stark contrast to the natural tones surrounding them. With a coordinated effort, they lifted it, feeling the weight of the vessel bond them in shared purpose. They carried it to the bank, the muscles in their arms flexing with the effort, their movements synchronized. "Ready for this?" Tom asked, a playful challenge in his gaze as he looked over at Lola. "Absolutely," she responded. "It's going to be fun to have something good come from those grueling workouts you put me through." She felt a surge of strength within her. As they set the kayak down gently on the grassy bank, Lola's heart raced with anticipation. It wasn't just the prospect of paddling down the river that quickened her pulse, it was the journey ahead, the unspoken promise that what they started here could lead to uncharted waters, ripe for exploration. With a gentle push-off from the bank, the kayak cut through the stillness of the water, the rhythmic dip and pull of their paddles creating soft ripples in their wake. Lola's laughter rose and fell like the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull, her dark hair fluttering in the breeze as she jested with Tom about his so-called expert steering. "Sure you don't need a GPS for this river," she teased, her voice warm with humor. "Huh? And spoil the adventure?" "Never," Tom retorted. As they navigated through the bends and currents, the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, alone on the expansive ribbon of water. The conversation ebbed and flowed with ease, touching on everything from their favorite childhood memories to the quirkiest laws in Texas towns. Each shared story was a brick in the foundation of their burgeoning connection. "Did you know it's illegal to milk someone else's cow?" Lola said, splashing a bit of water toward Tom as she pivoted the kayak around a fallen branch. "Guess I'll cancel my weekend plans then," Tom chuckled, skillfully maneuvering them back into smoother waters. The hours slipped by unnoticed. Their laughter mingled with the calls of birds hidden among the lush greenery lining the riverbanks, creating a symphony of nature and human joy. Eventually, the current slowed, and they found a secluded spot where the grassy bank invited them to rest. They pulled the kayak ashore, its bottom scraping lightly against the gravel. Tethering the vessel securely, they unburdened themselves of life vests, feeling the midday heat envelope them. Tom spread out a blanket with practiced ease, the red and white checkered fabric contrasting vividly against the greenery. From the cooler, he produced an array of sandwiches, fresh fruit, and the homemade chocolate chip cookies that Lola had baked the night before. The scent of the food mingled with the earthy river smells, promising satisfaction for their well-earned hunger. These cookies are almost as good as Sarah's. I guess she's rubbing off on me, Lola commented. Everything she makes is amazing, Tom agreed, watching Lola with a contented expression. They ate in comfortable silence, the occasional chuckle escaping as they caught each other's eye. With every bite, Lola felt a sense of belonging, not just to the town she called home, but to this unfolding chapter of her life. Time has a way of slowing down out here, doesn't it? Tom mused, his gaze lingering on the undulating river before them. Or maybe we're just learning to appreciate the moments as they come, Lola replied, leaning back on her elbows, feeling the sun kiss her skin and the breeze whisper secrets through her hair. As they stood side by side, surveying the peaceful flow of the river, a silence fell between them, not awkward but heavy with unspoken words. Thanks for today, Lola whispered. I needed this more than I knew. Tom turned to her, his smile reaching his eyes. It's been my pleasure, he said, his tone conveying a warmth that resonated within her. Their gazes locked, and something shifted in the air, a charge, palpable and sweet. Lola's breath caught as Tom stepped closer, his hand finding its way to her cheek, his touch as tender as the breeze that played with the loose strands of her dark hair. The anticipation built like the crescendo of a favorite song, one she'd only just learned the melody to, but already adored. May I? Tom's question was soft, almost reverent, as if understanding the significance of the moment. Lola nodded, her heart thrumming a resounding yes, and then his lips met hers, a kiss that was a delicate inquiry at first, then deepening, confident. In that kiss, Lola tasted the sweetness of the cookies, the tang of adventure, and the promise of something more. She kissed him back, her assertiveness surprising her, matching his passion with a fervor she'd reserved for courtroom victories and late-night briefs. As they pulled away, breathless and smiling, Lola felt a revelation wash over her. She'd always known herself to be formidable in the face of legal challenges, a force to be reckoned with when it came to her career, but this strength that allowed her to be vulnerable, to open up to the possibility of love, was new terrain. And she was navigating it with a grace she hadn't credited herself with before. Wow, she breathed out, her smile encapsulating the wonder of discovery. Yeah, Tom agreed, his thumb brushing her bottom lip as if to memorize the feel of it. Wow. They stood there, on the banks of the river that had witnessed their burgeoning affection, each aware that they had crossed a threshold. For Lola, it was more than the thrill of a first kiss. Her strength was not just in her ambition, but in her ability to embrace the unknown with an open heart. Ready to head back? Tom asked after a while. More than ready, Lola replied, her confidence buoyant. Let's see what else the day has in store for us. Tom paddled with a rhythmic grace, the kayak cutting through the water like it was second nature to him. Lola matched his strokes, feeling the pull in her muscles, a satisfying burn that reminded her of the miles they'd already covered. The river, glistening under the Texas sun, held them in its gentle embrace, its currents a whispering soundtrack to their adventure. Never thought I'd be so at peace out here, Tom confessed during a lull in their conversation, his gaze reflecting the azure sky above. With you, it's different. I've never felt this kind of connection with anyone. Lola's heart skipped a beat, her paddle momentarily stilled by his admission. She watched as a crane took flight nearby, its wings unfurling against the vastness of the horizon. She felt a kinship with the bird, soaring on the updrafts of newfound emotions. Neither have I, she replied, her voice a soft echo amidst the rustling reeds flanking the riverbank. They continued on, the current carrying them past overhanging branches that framed the sky in shades of green and brown. The world around them felt alive, vibrant, and Lola soaked in every detail, the way the sunlight danced upon the ripples, the earthy scent of the river mingling with the wildflowers dotting the banks, the laughter that spilled from Tom's lips when a fish jumped near their kayak, sending a spray of cool water their way. They navigated through a narrower section of the river, where the call of cicadas grew louder and the shadows played tricks on their eyes. It was a dance of push and pull, give and take, much like the burgeoning relationship between them. With each stroke forward, Lola felt herself growing stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. The hours passed unnoticed, marked only by the shifting position of the sun in the sky and the gradual ease that settled between them. They spoke of inconsequential things, favorite foods from the local diner, their favorite movies, and dreams that stretched beyond the confines of their small town. The truck's tires crunched on the gravel driveway as Tom brought it to a soft stop in front of Lola's brick home. The engine's hum died away, leaving a comfortable silence as they both lingered in the moment. Today was, Tom started, his voice trailing off as he turned in his seat to face her, his eyes reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. Perfect, Lola finished for him. He smiled, and with a gentle hand, he brushed a stray lock of hair from her flushed cheek. I'm glad you think so. Lola's heart fluttered, a sensation she felt echoed in the warmth of her sunburned skin. The soreness of her muscles reminded her of the miles they'd kayaked, of the strength she never knew she possessed until today. Wait here, he whispered, stepping out of the truck with an ease that spoke of his fitness. He moved around to her door, opening it with a chivalrous flair that made her giggle. Such a gentleman, she teased, taking the hand he offered to help her down. Their fingers lingered together, reluctant to part, as they walked to her front porch. The wooden steps creaked under their weight. Her porch swing moved gently in the breeze. Thank you for today, for everything, she said as she turned to face him, the porch light casting a golden glow around them. It was my pleasure, Lola. Truly, he replied, stepping closer. Then, in a movement as natural as the river's flow, Tom leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a kiss that was tender yet promised more. As they parted, Tom's gaze held hers, and in it, she saw not just the reflection of herself, but a depth of feeling that mirrored her own. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, his voice steady, but his eyes revealing the anticipation beneath. I'll be waiting, she replied, her smile radiant as she watched him walk back to his truck, each step measured and reluctant. With one last wave, he drove off, leaving her wrapped in the afterglow of the day. She touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss, and sank into the weathered rocking chair. Lola replayed every moment in her mind, the feel of the paddle in her hands, the spray of the river on her skin, the sound of Tom's laughter mingling with her own. Each memory was a snapshot, vibrant and alive, fueling the joy that bubbled up inside her. Sunburned and sore, yes, but also undeniably ecstatic, Lola let out a contented sigh, leaning back and gazing at the sky's canvas, now splashed with stars. The day had been absolutely perfect. And she was so happy things were moving with Tom. Lola fidgeted with the hem of her sundress, the fabric light against her skin as she sat at the wrought iron table outside Sarah's bakery. Her friends gathered around, their faces bright with the kind of familiarity that only years of shared secrets could etch. Girl, you're positively glowing, Rachel said, her caring smile beaming across the table as she cradled a steaming mug of coffee. And have you lost more weight? You look amazing. Thanks, Lola replied, a blush warming her cheeks that rivaled the sunburn from yesterday. She had been working on herself for months now, but it was more than the physical change, it was the confidence that came with feeling strong and capable. Tell us everything, Danielle urged, her writer's curiosity never satisfied, her eyes eager for the details that might fuel her next romantic subplot. Every single detail, Natalie chimed in, her nursing shift forgotten in the wake of potential romance. Lola took a deep breath, reliving the moments she'd spent with Tom on the river. It was incredible. We kayaked until lunch, just talking and laughing. He makes me feel so alive? Sarah proposed, her empathetic nature tuning into Lola's unspoken emotions. Yes, alive, Lola confirmed, her heart skipping as though it sought to keep pace with the memory. And then we shared our first kiss overlooking the river. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper as if it carried the weight of the revelation. I think I'm in love with him. Her friends exchanged glances, their collective joy for Lola evident. They had seen her guard her heart like a fortress, and now the walls were coming down, brick by brick. Love looks good on you, Sarah said with a knowing nod. Not just in your heart, but all over. Speaking of which, Rachel added, pointing to Lola's toned arms, those kayaking muscles are no joke. You've got some serious definition going on. Lola laughed, flexing playfully. I guess Tom isn't just good for my emotional health. Sounds like he's a keeper, Natalie remarked, leaning back in her chair with an exhausted yet contented sigh. Definitely, Danielle agreed, scribbling a note in her ever-present journal. You've got yourself a real-life romance hero. As they delved into a lunch of delicate sandwiches and flaky croissants, Lola allowed the conversation to wash over her. With every bite, every laugh shared among friends, her excitement for what lay ahead grew. Hopefully what lay ahead was many more lunches with her friends, but more than that, many more kisses with Tom. There was something special about him, and she hoped he felt the same way about her. Chapter 7. Lola's muscles burned with the sweet agony of exertion, her arms trembling as she hoisted the weighted barbell above her head one more time. Sweat beaded on her forehead, tracing a line down her temple as she completed her final rep, the barbell clattering back onto its rack with a satisfying clang. Nice work, Sanchez, Tom praised from his spot by her side, his dark eyes gleaming with pride. I think your biceps are about to start their own law firm. Objection sustained, Lola quipped back, panting slightly as she rolled her shoulders back to ease the tension. She leaned against the padded bench, her dark hair escaping its ponytail to frame her flushed face. Careful there, Tom chuckled, stepping closer to adjust the loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering just a moment too long. You'll have those weights suing for muscle harassment. Only if they can't handle the cross-examination, she fired back, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. Despite the burn in her limbs, the lightness in her chest felt like freedom, a testament to the strength she was building inside and out. Then I guess it's my job to keep turning up the heat, Tom said, offering her a hand to help her off the bench. As she took it, the warmth from his skin seemed to seep into hers, grounding her. Bring it on, Carter. The banter between them was effortless, a volley of words that came as naturally as breathing, and as necessary as the pulse that thrummed through her veins when he was near. Lola's breath steadied, a rhythm as calming as the silence that settled over the gym. She sat there, grounded in the moment, her forehead glistening with beads of effort that rolled down to meet the contours of her collarbone. Hey, Tom's voice was soft. You okay? She opened her eyes to find him watching her, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. Despite the ruggedness of his appearance, there was a gentleness to Tom that always managed to shine through. Yeah, I'm just thinking, Lola admitted, allowing a wistful smile to trace her lips. About, he prompted, his tone inviting rather than prying, as he took a seat beside her. About how far I've come, she said, and yet. Tom waited for her to finish her thought. Sometimes I still feel like that girl from a small town who's trying too hard to prove she's good enough, you know? Her eyes met his. Like no matter how many cases I win or how much I work out, I'll never shake off the feeling that people are waiting for me to slip up. Sounds exhausting, he said, his voice devoid of judgment. It is. Lola's shoulders sagged. I think I'm always worried about how others see me, that they'll notice the insecurities I try so hard to hide. Tom's hand, warm and steady, found its way to the small of Lola's back as she sat there, the rise and fall of her chest gradually steadier. Hey, he said softly, his thumb drawing small circles through the fabric of her tank top. You've got this all wrong, Lola. She frowned up at him, the vulnerability in her eyes starkly apparent. How so? Because you're not that girl trying too hard. You're the woman who's achieving more than she ever thought possible. Tom's voice was firm but gentle. You've built a life on your own terms. That's not just good enough, that's extraordinary. As he spoke, something in his gaze hinted at a shared understanding, a kinship of hidden battles. I get it, though. I do. We've all got our ghosts, don't we? He paused. There was a time when I nearly let my past ruin me. But I fought through it because people like us? We're fighters, Lola. Lola nodded, the tight knot in her stomach loosening slightly at the sound of his words, yet a stubborn shard of doubt lingered, a splinter embedded deep within. "Fighters," she said, but her voice was tinged with a hesitance that betrayed the internal struggle still raging inside her. "Absolutely," he affirmed, reading her expression with an uncanny accuracy. "And guess what? Fighters have scars. It's okay to have them. Just means we've been through battles and come out stronger." "Scars," she whispered, turning the word over in her mind. She wanted to believe him, to let go of the fear that she was somehow less for all she had endured. Yet, the familiar twinge of hesitation held her back, a delicate tension strung between embracing the strength of her present and the shadows of her past. "Scars are just part of our story, Lola. They don't define us," Tom insisted gently. She met his gaze, searching for the conviction to snuff out the last of her doubts. There was a warmth there in Tom's eyes, a steadfast promise that he saw her, really saw her, and that, perhaps, was the most terrifying and thrilling realization of all. Tom reached out instinctively, his touch gentle as he tucked the errant strand behind her ear, his fingertips grazing the warmth of her skin. The simple act sent a ripple through the air, charged with an intimacy that neither could deny. His hand lingered for a moment longer on her shoulder, offering silent support, a gesture that spoke volumes of the trust and affection that had quietly woven itself into the fabric of their interactions. "Anytime," he replied, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. Lola savored the closeness, allowing herself to lean ever so slightly into his touch. It was these small moments, these fleeting connections, that seemed to stitch the gaps between her past insecurities and the woman she was steadily becoming. A woman who dared to hope, to feel, to want more. They both moved to collect their things. Their movements were in sync, a dance they had mastered over time, with each step and bend reflecting the ease of their bond. "Good session today," Tom remarked, wiping down the equipment with a towel, his forearms flexing with the motion. "You're really pushing your limits." "Couldn't have done it without you," Lola responded, her voice softening with sincerity. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, flushed cheeks, bright eyes, a body strong and capable, and felt a surge of pride. Together, they walked out of the gym, the heavy door closing behind them with a decisive click. The Texas sun greeted them with an embrace of warmth, mirroring the heat that still hummed beneath Lola's skin. They shared a look. "Hey, I made some of my abuela's beef enchiladas for supper," she said. "They're in the fridge right now. I just need to pop them in the oven. Want to come over and help me devour them?" The corners of Tom's mouth lifted into a grin, his eyes lighting up at the mention of Lola's cooking. "Enchiladas sound perfect," Tom replied, his voice warm with anticipation. He zipped his bag closed with a swift motion, his gaze holding hers. "I'd love to." "Great." Lola's heart quickened at his response. It wasn't just the promise of her grandmother's recipe that thrilled her, it was the prospect of more time alone with him, in the comfort of her own space. "Follow me?" she asked, slinging the strap of her gym bag over her shoulder. "Right behind you," he assured, falling into step beside her as they headed for the parking lot. She drove the short distance to her house, and hurried inside, moving around her kitchen with the grace of a seasoned salsa dancer, each step deliberate and fluid. The aroma of cumin and garlic perfumed the air, swirling with the earthy scent of corn tortillas as she slid the tray into the oven. Tom leaned against the doorframe, admiring the way her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders, the strands catching light from the overhead bulbs. He watched the rise and fall of her efforts, the soft hum of concentration that escaped her lips as she worked. "Need any help?" he offered, though he was content just observing her in her element. She glanced over her shoulder, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Just keep me company," Lola said, her voice as warm as the kitchen. Tom obliged, his eyes tracing the contours of her figure, noting how she stood tall and assured, the very image of confidence. It was a stark contrast to the vulnerability she'd shown during their workout session. Here, in this space, Lola was comfortable in a way she wasn't in the gym. The oven timer dinged, and she pulled out the enchiladas, steam rising from the bubbling cheese on top. She plated them with practiced ease, garnishing each serving with a sprig of fresh cilantro. They sat at the small dining table, the dish between them commanding their full attention. "Abuela's recipe?" Tom asked before taking a bite, the blend of spices and tender beef enveloping his senses. "See," Lola confirmed with pride, watching him for his reaction. "These are incredible, Lola," he praised sincerely, the flavors transporting him to a place of familial warmth and tradition. "You've got magic in your hands." Her laugh, rich and heartfelt, filled the room. "It's all in the love you put into it," she replied, her cheeks flushed with pleasure from the compliment. They ate in companionable silence, forks scraping against plates, punctuated by satisfied sighs. Every now and then, their glances met, a silent conversation passing through their shared gazes. With each bite, it seemed as if the walls Lola had built around herself crumbled a little more, revealing the layers of her identity, from the formidable lawyer to the woman who cherished the simple joys of cooking for someone she cared about. Lola brushed the last of the crumbs from her hands, a residual hint of spice lingering in the air as she stood. The meal had been a cozy interlude, an unspoken dance of domesticity that left her heart thrumming with a newfound rhythm. "Come on," she said, her voice carrying a note of invitation as she gestured toward the living room. "Let's get comfortable." She hoped the twinkle in her eye communicated her deeper wish, her yearning for the sweetness of his lips, once more. Tom followed her lead. As they settled onto the plush sofa, the fabric sighed beneath their weight. "You know," Lola began, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, "when you were showing me that new move at the gym, the one with the weights," she chuckled softly. "I thought I was going to collapse right then and there." Tom's laugh filled the space between them. "I knew you could handle it. You're stronger than you think, Lola." His eyes met hers, a spark of admiration glowing within their depths. Their conversation wove through the laughter and sweat of today's workout. Her heart swelled in the easy cadence of their exchange, the familiar banter that was both comforting and exhilarating. As they recounted a particularly funny mishap involving an overzealous jump rope session, their eyes locked. Time seemed to stretch, elastic and indulgent, as the distance between them shrank under the gravity of their mutual pull. Tom's steady breath warmed Lola's face as he leaned in, the space between them charged with anticipation. Lola's pulse quickened, her chest rose and fell more noticeably, betraying the calm she tried to project. Tom's lips, just inches from hers, seemed to tease the inevitability of their connection. A strand of her dark hair fell forward, and Tom's gaze flickered to it before meeting her eyes again. Lola's breath caught in her throat, a silent gasp suspended in time. With courage fueled by desire and the blossoming assurance within her, Lola closed her eyes and bridged the gap. Her lips met his in a kiss that ignited from gentle to fervent in the span of a heartbeat. The world around them dissolved into nothingness as they lost themselves in the fervor of the moment. Tom responded with equal passion, his hands finding their way to her waist, pulling her closer still. Lola's fingertips grazed the nape of his neck, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath the soft curls of his dark hair. They kissed as if carving out a space and time reserved only for them, where the ticking of the clock on the wall no longer dictated the pace of their hearts. Tom's arms encircled Lola, pulling her into him. The kiss deepened, a crescendo of shared longing that pushed everything else into the background. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing his name. They pressed closer, an intricate dance of desire and tenderness. Their breaths mingled, warm and quick, as the kiss evolved from a mere touch to a revelation of emotions kept hidden for too long. The room spun gently around them, a carousel of muted colors and soft textures, all made brighter and richer by the connection they shared. It was as if every moment of their lives had been a winding path leading them here, to this intimate collision where hesitation lost its grip and boldness took the reins. Tom's hand lifted, pausing the world around them as he tenderly swept a loose strand of hair from Lola's flushed cheek. The simple gesture trailed warmth down her spine. His fingers lingered near her jawline. "What we have," he whispered, voice low and reverent, "it's real, Lola. And it's worth every second, every heartbeat." In that small, infinite space of time, Lola felt the tight knot of apprehension within her chest begin to unravel. Here was a man who saw beyond the facade of the driven lawyer, who looked at her and saw someone worth more than her accolades or ambitions. "Sometimes I'm scared," she confessed, eyes locked with his, searching for the acceptance she feared to hope for. "I built these walls, Tom, and I don't know how to tear them down." What if I'm not enough? Tom's gaze never wavered, steady and sure. You are enough, Lola, more than enough. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, a touch meant to soothe away the ghosts of her doubts. And those walls? We'll climb them together, tear them down brick by brick if we have to. Whatever it takes. Thank you, Tom, she said, her own hand coming up to cover his, anchoring it against her face. For seeing me. For being here. Her words were a promise, an acknowledgement of the connection that simmered between them, as tangible as the heat that still lingered on their skin from the day's workout and the passion that had followed. Lola, we're stronger together than apart, he said earnestly. There isn't a hurdle too high, nor a shadow too dark, that we can't overcome side by side. Our love, it's something fierce, something that doesn't back down from a fight. Is it worth it? She asked, though the question felt frail against the certainty in his eyes. For you, to fight for this, for us? Every single day, Lola, Tom answered without hesitation, his voice resonating with a conviction that rattled her bones. You make every challenge worth facing. In response, Lola reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she brushed away a bead of sweat that had escaped down his temple. The small gesture closed the space between them. Time will tell, huh? Tom murmured. Time, she echoed, and us. When the time came for Tom to leave, the door closed softly behind him, sealing the warmth of their night inside. He paused on the porch, the wooden boards creaking under his weight as if sighing in contentment. A smile played on Tom's lips, a smile that was boyish yet knowing, full of the gravity of what had transpired. The night wrapped around him like a promise as he walked to his truck, parked under the halo of the streetlight. The engine roared to life, the sound echoing through the quiet streets of the small town that had seen the unfolding of their story. He rolled down the window, letting the cool air rush in and mix with the lingering heat of the Texas evening. As he drove away, the smile never left his face. In the rearview mirror, Lola's house grew smaller, but the image of her, framed by the doorway, stayed with him, etched permanently into the canvas of his memory. He'd found her, the girl of his dreams. In the rearview mirror, Lola's house faded into the distance, but the journey ahead shimmered brightly, paved with enchiladas, shared workouts, and kisses that tasted of new beginnings. Chapter 8. Lola's mind was churning. She and Tom had gotten close, and while she had very strong feelings for him, she didn't want to put her heart on the line only to have it stomped on. She'd been in short relationships before, but never had there been one that hadn't ended horribly with her nursing a broken heart. Perhaps it was time to end her training sessions with Tom and continue on her own. She didn't even have to go to the gym. She could turn her spare bedroom into a gym with a treadmill and weights. That would serve the same purpose, wouldn't it? Lola opened her eyes, her gaze catching a glimpse of the framed photograph on the wall, a snapshot of her standing proudly outside the courthouse on the day she'd won her first case. The drive that propelled her career now seemed at odds with the uncertainty clouding her heart. A sigh escaped her lips as she picked up the phone once more, her thumb hovering over the call button. If she called him and cancelled, her heart wouldn't be at risk. But what if Tom was the love of her life? It was hard to know she should do. Is it fear of getting hurt, or is it the fear of being truly seen? She whispered to the silence, the question hanging in the air like the aroma of the spicy Texan chili she'd cooked just nights before, comforting yet laced with complexity. In the stillness of her home, surrounded by the mementos of victories and struggles past, Lola wrestled with the decision that felt like choosing between the safety of solitude or the risk-laden promise of companionship. The lawyer in her demanded evidence, precedent, and assurance, none of which love kindly offered, and yet, Lola knew that some choices were governed by the heart rather than the mind. Call him, she finally murmured, steeling herself. Before fear decides for you. The first ring shattered the stillness. Whether the call would end in goodbye or lead to a deeper hello, only time would tell. A faint knock echoed through Lola's house, a soft intrusion into her cocoon of solitude. Lola's gaze drifted from the phone, now silent on the coffee table, to the door, where the rhythmic tapping persisted. Coming, she called out, her voice tinged with an unexpected hopefulness. Pulling herself up, she smoothed down her blouse, an automatic gesture of composure. The door swung open to reveal Sarah, arms open wide, her auburn hair catching the last slivers of twilight that dared to creep past the threshold. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" Lola's brows knit in mild confusion, but before the question fully formed on her lips, she was enveloped in the warmth of her friend's embrace. "Couldn't let you face the storm alone," Sarah said, stepping back with a knowing smile. Guided by the quiet strength emanating from Sarah, Lola found herself drawn toward the couch. "Talk to me, Lola," Sarah urged gently, her hand finding Lola's, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of uncertainty. Lola stared at the box of tissues Sarah had placed between them, her laugh a short release of tension. "I'm supposed to be the strong one, right? Strength isn't about facing things alone, you know that." Sarah's voice was soft, but firm. "Ever since I started training with Tom," Lola's sentence trailed off, her gaze lost somewhere between what was and what might be. She felt Sarah's patience, as expansive as the Texas sky, waiting for her to find the words. "It's more than just the exercise, isn't it?" Sarah prodded lightly, an artisan shaping the space for confessions. Lola breathed in deeply. "With every session, I feel myself getting stronger, not just physically, but, here." She placed a hand over her heart, its beat steady under the pressure of revelation. "Then why stop?" Sarah's query was simple. "Because." Lola hesitated. "What if I'm not ready for whatever comes next? With him, with us? Isn't that the beauty of it, though? Embracing the unknown, taking that leap? Or fall flat on my face," Lola half-joked. "Either way, you'll get back up. You always do." Sarah's confidence in her was unyielding. "I'm just so afraid, Sarah," Lola confessed. "Afraid that if I let myself fall for him, I'll just end up broken. Again." Her dark eyes brimmed with uncertainty. Sarah reached across the space between them, her hand warm and comforting atop Lola's. "You are one of the strongest people I know," she said gently. "You've built walls to protect yourself, and that's okay. But don't let those walls keep out the very thing that could make you happier than you've ever been." "But what if I'm not? What if I'm not enough?" Lola whispered. "Enough?" Sarah's tone was incredulous. "Lola, you're more than enough. You're brilliant, talented, and beautiful. Tom would have to be a fool not to see that." A tear escaped, tracing a path down Lola's cheek. "I just don't want to lose myself, to be swallowed up by someone else's idea of who I should be." "Then you hold on to yourself, just like you always have," Sarah insisted, her eyes locking onto Lola's with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "But also, give yourself permission to be loved, truly loved, for exactly who you are." "Is that what you did with Jake?" Lola asked tentatively, referring to Sarah's husband. "Exactly. And look where that led me," Sarah replied. The next morning Lola met up with Tom in the local coffee shop, each of them sitting with their hands wrapped around a mug of steaming coffee. "Life is a series of challenges, isn't it?" Lola mused aloud, her gaze steady on Tom's face. "It is," Tom agreed, the timbre of his voice grounding her. "But it's also about the triumphs, no matter how small. Every step forward is a victory." Lola considered his words, recognizing the wisdom within them. She found herself sharing pieces of her life she'd kept hidden away, trusting Tom with the weight of her ambitions and the depth of her insecurities. "Sometimes I think we're all just trying to find our way back to that taste of home, like Sarah says," she continued. "Maybe that's what brings us closer to others, our search for something familiar, something true," Tom responded, his hand reaching across the table to cover hers. Tom hesitated, his gaze dropping to the worn wooden grain of the table that separated them. He took a deep breath, the muscles in his jaw tightening before he spoke. "My dad, he wasn't the kindest man," Tom said. "He had his own demons, and sometimes, he'd let them loose on us." Lola watched him, her heart constricting as she saw the shadow of past pain flicker across his features. His hands, those strong hands that had guided her through countless workouts, now fidgeted with a stray napkin, twisting it into a tight spiral. "Growing up, I never really saw what a healthy relationship looked like," he continued, meeting her eyes with a vulnerability that she had not seen in him before. It made me question love, whether it was worth the risk. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his hand, stilling its nervous movement. Tom, she said softly. You're not your father. You've chosen a different path. He looked up at her. I know, he replied. But old fears die hard, you know? They make you build walls so high you can't even see over them anymore. Maybe, Lola conceded, squeezing his hand gently. But walls can be climbed, or better yet, taken down brick by brick. And you don't have to do it alone. Growing up, my family was always moving around, Tom continued, his eyes fixed on some distant memory. My dad was difficult to be around, and he tended to lose his job often, so we never stayed in one place for long. It was hard, never having a sense of home or stability. Then, when I was in college, I fell in love with this girl, Tom went on. We were together for a while, but then she cheated on me. It destroyed me, made me feel like I wasn't enough. Thank you for telling me, she said softly, her hand reaching across the table to cover his. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. Thank you for understanding, he replied. It means a lot to me. In that moment, Lola knew that their shared vulnerabilities were not a hindrance, but a source of strength. As they talked and laughed over their coffee, she felt herself opening up in ways she never thought possible. Sometimes, I think the past is like this latte, he said, tracing a finger around the rim of his cup, the froth long dissolved into the dark brew. Seems perfect at first glance, but give it time, and the bitterness finds its way to the surface. Lola felt a pang in her chest, a resonance with his metaphor she couldn't deny. Her own past was a series of calculated decisions, each one designed to build the fortress around her heart, safe, predictable, unassailable. Yet here she sat, walls crumbling before a man whose soul echoed with wounds as deep as her own. Life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? She murmured. Test or not, it shapes us, Lola. It's what we do with the lessons that counts, Tom replied, his thumb caressing her skin. Can two people with scars help each other heal, or do they just end up tearing each other apart? Lola asked. Maybe it's not about the scars themselves, Tom said. It's about finding someone who can look at those scars and see survival, not just a record of pain. Survival, she repeated. Survival, Tom said again, his hand squeezing hers ever so slightly. Change isn't just about turning over a new leaf, it's about growing roots in fresh soil, you know? Fresh soil, she murmured. Deep down, she knew that love was an act of cultivation, requiring patience, care, and sometimes the courage to prune back the thorns. Tom's hand found hers again. I'm not asking you to fix me, he said softly. Just to. Maybe walk beside me while I fix myself. His vulnerability, the quiet strength in his admission, struck a chord. In that moment, Lola saw his commitment to personal growth. And she realized that perhaps their shared imperfections didn't have to be barriers. Your honesty, it's like a mirror, Lola began. It's forcing me to look at my own reflections, my own scars. I've built walls, Tom. High ones. And for a good reason, or so I believed. She swallowed. But seeing you, striving, grappling with your shadows, it's inspiring. It makes me want to tear down those barriers, even if I'm terrified of what might happen. Terrifying, he echoed. Yeah, I get that. But, Lola, I also see us helping each other dismantle those walls, brick by brick. A laugh bubbled up in Lola's throat, surprising her with its lightness. Brick by brick, she repeated with a nod, the corners of her mouth lifting in a tentative smile. Exactly, Tom said. And who knows? Maybe what we build together will be stronger than anything we could have imagined on our own. Lola reached across the small wooden table, her fingers hesitating just before they brushed against Tom's. Life, it's like this cup of coffee, isn't it? Lola mused aloud, her gaze flickering to the steaming mug between them. Bitter, hot, but with the right amount of sweetness, it becomes something comforting, something we crave. Sweetness like you, Tom replied softly. Maybe I'm more like the cream, she chuckled. Trying to soften the harshness, blending until everything feels just right. Tom's thumb caressed the back of her hand in slow, soothing circles. And I've been too much black coffee on my own, strong, but too harsh, needing something to balance me out. Sounds like we make a good cup together, Lola whispered. Let's take a walk, Tom suggested, his voice low and inviting. Lead the way, Lola said as they stood in unison. They stepped out of the coffee shop, the door closing behind them with a soft jingle. The streets of the small Texas town were quiet as they strolled side by side, the lingering heat of the day slowly succumbing to the cool touch of the coming night. Where are we going? Lola asked. Does it matter? Tom responded. As long as we're moving forward, together. Chapter 9. Lola and Tom had wandered aimlessly after their coffee, engaged in the kind of easy conversation that made hours feel like minutes. The walk was filled with easy conversation and laughter, a welcome respite after their intense talk in the coffee shop. It wasn't until Lola's little house, with its inviting porch swing, came into view that they realized where their feet had led them. She glanced up at Tom, her dark hair framing her face in the wind's gentle tousle, and found his sea-blue eyes already on her, reflecting a quiet surprise that mirrored her own. Looks like we've walked ourselves right back to my doorstep, she said with a chuckle. Seems like it, Tom agreed, his voice carrying the warmth of the fading day. His neatly trimmed beard did little to hide his smile. Lola fiddled with her house keys, the metal cool and solid in her palm, a stark contrast to the fluttering in her stomach. If you're not busy, would you like to come in? Her voice was confident, yet there was an undercurrent of vulnerability that she seldom allowed others to hear. Are you sure? Tom asked. Absolutely, Lola affirmed, stepping onto the porch and unlocking the door. I'd love to make us supper. Sounds perfect, Tom replied, following her inside. Make yourself at home, Lola said as she slipped off her heels and padded across the tiled floor. Can I get you something to drink? Agua fresca, perhaps? Sure, Tom responded, watching her move around the kitchen. There was a softness to her, a carefree sway to her hips as she reached for glasses and the hum of a half-remembered mariachi tune that spilled from her lips. And as Lola poured the ruby-red agua fresca, he thought that maybe, just maybe, time could slow down enough for them to savor whatever this was that simmered softly between them. Tom watched as Lola placed his drink on the table, its color winking at him like a jewel in the soft light of the kitchen. He took a slow sip, the tangy sweetness dancing on his tongue, and set the glass down with a decision already forming in his mind. Actually, how about we order in tonight, he suggested, his voice as casual as he could muster. I'd rather spend my time talking with you than watching you cook. A flicker of surprise crossed Lola's face, but it quickly melted into a warm smile. Pizza all right with you, she asked, reaching for her phone on the counter. Perfect, Tom replied, feeling a sense of ease settle over him. While they waited for the delivery, they hovered around the kitchen island, their conversation meandering. The doorbell rang, heralding the arrival of a piping hot pizza. They settled at the small dining table, the pizza between them serving as both sustenance and centerpiece. She hands him a plate and fork and he looks at them as if he's never seen them before. You use a plate for pizza? He asked. You don't? She countered. He shakes his head but accepts the plate, setting the fork on the table. So, this trial you've been prepping for, Tom ventured, brushing a crumb from his lip. Sounds like it's pretty important to you. Lola leaned back in her chair, a seriousness knitting her brows together. It is, she admitted, her fork idly tracing the edge of her plate. This one's personal. It's about giving a voice to those who feel powerless, making sure justice isn't just a privilege for the wealthy. He nodded, understanding her drive. It was one of the things that drew him to her. You're going to be brilliant, he said, a note of conviction in his voice. You always are. She met his gaze, and he saw the flicker of vulnerability behind her confidence. Thanks, Tom. Of course, that's easy for you to say since you've never seen me in the courtroom. He laughed, shaking his head at her. Their conversation lingered over the slices of pizza, delving into the nuances of the legal system, dissecting strategies, and sharing quiet moments of mutual respect. Lola's laughter filled the room, genuine and unguarded, as they cleared away the empty pizza box. Tom helped her with the dishes, their fingers occasionally brushing, sending tiny jolts of awareness through them both. Lola flicked off the kitchen lights. A single lamp cast a warm pool of light on the couch where she and Tom settled in. She grabbed the remote, her thumb hovering over the play button. "Ready for some Amazonian action?" she teased, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. It was Wonder Woman tonight, a film she'd postponed watching for years. It was easy to be too busy when you were alone. Dating Tom made it possible for her to do things other than work and not feel even a bit of guilt. "Absolutely," Tom replied, mirroring her excitement. "I've heard you're quite the fan of strong female leads." A chuckle escaped her lips. "Guilty as charged." With a press of a button, the screen came to life, the iconic figure of Diana, Princess of Themyscira, filling the frame. As the opening scenes unfolded, Lola felt herself drawn into the world of gods and mortals, of bravery and battles. Gradually, the distance between them lessened as they both leaned into the cushions, shoulders brushing with each casual shift. Tom's arm found its way behind her, resting along the back of the sofa, an invitation she accepted without a word. She tucked her feet beneath her, leaning into the curve of his body, feeling the warmth radiate from him. The action on screen commanded their attention, yet it was the quiet intimacy growing between them that underscored every glance and smile they exchanged. As Wonder Woman fought for justice, so did Lola find herself wrestling with the realization that moments like these were as vital as any courtroom victory. "Gal Gadot really does kick some serious butt," Tom murmured, his voice low and tinged with humor. His gaze flickered toward her, admiration clear in his eyes, not just for the heroine on screen, but for the woman nestled against him. "Kind of makes you want to take on the world, doesn't it?" Lola responded, her words infused with newfound yearning, not just for triumphs in her career, but for personal conquests too. Each scene seemed to pull them closer, physically and emotionally, until they were a tangle of limbs, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. As Gal Gadot's Diana Prince charged through the war-torn battlefield on the screen, an electric charge of its own kind coursed between Lola and Tom. It started subtly, an accidental brush of fingers and a shared chuckle that ended with their eyes lingering just a moment too long. The air in Lola's living room grew thick, palpable with a desire, both innocent and fervent. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" Lola whispered. "Like what?" Tom's response was equally hushed, his warm breath fanning against her cheek as he turned to face her. "Like, every nerve in my body is awake," she confessed, her dark eyes locked onto his, searching for an answer or perhaps permission. "Only if it's with the right person," Tom said, his hand finding hers, giving it a gentle squeeze that sent ripples of anticipation through her veins. It was then, as Wonder Woman deflected bullets and leaped into the air, that their lips found each other, a collision of passion that was both explosive and delicate. With each kiss, they peeled away layers of hesitation. Clothing followed suit, slipping off shoulders and hips with a quiet urgency that left them bare, not just in flesh but in vulnerability. Lola's heart hammered against her ribcage, each beat a reminder of the uncharted waters she was navigating. Her mind found itself blissfully empty as Tom's touch traced the curves of her body. His hands were those of a personal trainer, strong, sure, but as they explored her skin, they made her feel cherished. "Are you sure?" Tom asked, his voice laden with concern, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. "Never been more sure about anything," Lola replied. This was no court case to win, no jury to persuade, only a truth that resonated deep within her. She wanted this, wanted him, in the most primal and profound way possible. And so they came together, the world beyond the couch fading into nothingness, each caress built upon the last, writing a narrative of firsts that would be etched into the fabric of her being. They moved together with a rhythm that was both awkward and perfect. For Lola, time ceased to exist. There was only here and now, the taste of Tom, the sound of their mingled breaths, the feeling of being truly seen. And as they lay there, entwined in the afterglow, the threads of friendship and personal growth wove tightly around their hearts. Exhaustion gave way to tranquility as they lay in silence, the earlier passion having settled into something serene and comforting. Tom's fingers traced lazy circles on Lola's arm, every touch a whisper against her skin that spoke of care and tenderness. She could feel the warmth of his body, the solid presence of someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable and embraced her all the more. It was in the way he held her close, an unspoken promise that extended beyond the confines of the night. "Are you okay?" Tom's voice broke the comfortable silence, low and laced with concern. "More than okay," Lola replied. With Tom, she discovered parts of herself she hadn't known existed, vulnerability intertwined with strength, desire mingled with affection. It was a revelation, wrapped up in the arms of the man beside her. Lola found herself awake before Tom, watching him sleep. His features were relaxed, a stark contrast to the intensity she often saw when he trained his clients or when they bantered back and forth. She slid out from beneath the sheets, careful not to disturb him, and made her way to the kitchen. As she whisked eggs and diced vegetables for the omelets, Lola allowed herself the luxury of contemplation. The aroma of coffee soon filled the small kitchen, blending with the savory scent of the omelets. When Tom emerged, rubbing the remnants of sleep from his eyes, Lola greeted him with a smile that reached to her dark, expressive eyes. "Good morning," she said, sliding a plate in front of him. "Morning," he murmured, taking in the sight of the breakfast she'd prepared. "Looks amazing." They ate in a companionable silence, the kind of quiet that was comfortable rather than awkward. With each bite of the fluffy omelet, Tom knew he cared about her even more. "Thank you for this," he said earnestly, gesturing to the food and then to her, encompassing everything the gesture implied. "Thank you for last night," Lola countered, her sincerity matching his. "For being exactly who I needed you to be." Their gazes locked, and in the depths of Tom's eyes, Lola saw the reflection of her growing feelings, hopeful and cautious, yet brimming with possibility. Lola watched from her porch as Tom walked away. The morning air was still cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves in the massive oak tree that shaded her small front yard. She hugged herself, arms wrapped tightly around her torso, as if to keep the warmth of the night before from escaping. The house seemed too quiet after he left. With a sigh, she turned back inside, the screen door creaking softly behind her, and began gathering the breakfast dishes. Her movements were mechanical, hands working deftly as she cleaned up, but her mind was elsewhere. She scrubbed at a spot on a plate, her brow furrowed. Was it too soon, she wondered, her heart fluttering with a mix of elation and doubt. The omelets they shared had been fluffy and light, but now her stomach felt heavy. They'd crossed a threshold last night, and the weight of it pressed against her. "Get a grip, Lola," she muttered to herself, drying her hands on a dish towel decorated with sunflowers. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly noon. She needed to get ready. The Mexican restaurant was bustling when she arrived, the scent of spices and sizzling fajitas wafting through the air. Sarah, Rachel, Natalie, and Danielle were already seated in their usual booth, their faces lighting up as she approached. "Hey, girl!" Rachel greeted, scooting over to make room. "We ordered the queso, it's sinful." "Thanks," Lola said, sliding into the seat, the vinyl squeaking beneath her. A waiter set down a bowl of guacamole, and she dipped a chip into it absent-mindedly. "Okay, spill it," Natalie prompted, her glasses reflecting the midday light. "You've got that look." "Which look?" Lola feigned innocence, but her friends weren't fooled. "The I've got a secret look," Danielle chimed in, leaning forward with interest etched on her face. "All right." Lola took a breath, feeling the eyes of her closest confidants on her. Tom spent the night. A chorus of gasps and exclamations filled the booth, followed by rapid-fire questions. "Was he sweet?" Sarah asked, a knowing smile on her lips. "Did he cuddle?" Rachel inquired, her caring nature evident in her tone. "Details, Lola." "We need details," Natalie urged, her professional demeanor giving way to girlish curiosity. "Guys, slow down," Lola laughed, a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Yes, he was incredible, gentle and just perfect." Her words lingered in the air, and for a moment they all simply smiled at her, a shared understanding passing between them. "See? We told you he was a catch," Danielle said, reaching across the table to squeeze Lola's hand. Still, Lola hesitated, playing with the edge of her napkin. Part of me wonders if I made a mistake, rushing things. Only you can answer that, Sarah said softly. Does it feel right? Most of the time, yes, Lola admitted, glancing down at the array of colorful dishes on the table. But I worry about getting hurt, about messing up what could be something great. Life is messy, honey, Rachel said. But it's also beautiful. Especially when you find someone who makes you happy. Exactly, Natalie added, and if Tom shares breakfasts and watches superhero movies with you, then he's already doing better than most. Girl, anyone who looks at you the way Tom does is a keeper, Sarah said. He sees you, Lola. Really sees you. Natalie nodded in agreement, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. He's caring, and he respects your ambition. Those qualities aren't easy to come by. Rachel chimed in. And he's jumped right into your world, no hesitations. It's like he's ready to be part of whatever life throws at you both. Danielle nodded. His patience with you, it's poetic. It's not just about passion, it's the quiet moments, the understanding. That's what builds a story, a relationship. Lola absorbed their words, the chorus of her friends' voices harmonizing with the buzz of the small-town eatery. The clink of dishes and laughter from nearby tables seemed to echo their support, wrapping her in a comforting tapestry of camaraderie. I just don't want to mess things up, Lola confessed, her gaze lingering on the colorful mural painted along the restaurant's wall, a vibrant depiction of heart and home. None of us do, Danielle replied. But taking chances is part of the plot, isn't it? We're all writing our own love stories, page by unpredictable page. Besides, Natalie added, a playful lilt to her voice, you've got us. Chapter 10. Tom and Lola strolled along the riverbank. It was the fourth evening this week they found themselves wrapped up in each other's company, each date more enchanting than the last. They had picnicked under the sprawling branches of an old oak tree, shared tender moments over hot coffee at the quaint corner cafe, and even challenged each other to a playful game of mini-golf. Try this, Tom said, offering Lola a forkful of homemade peach cobbler he'd insisted they try from Sarah's bakery. The sweetness burst onto Lola's tongue, a symphony of flavor that made her close her eyes to savor it fully. Delicious, she murmured, opening her eyes to find him watching her intently. He smiled. Everything tastes better when you're around, Tom confessed, his voice low and tinged with sincerity. Lola's heartfelt chuckle set birds aloft from the nearby trees, her dark hair catching the last rays of sunlight. You say the sweetest things, Tom Carter. Their evenings were a blend of comfort and discovery, each learning the contours of the other's world. Through all the fun time they spent together, Lola couldn't stop thinking of her next case. Each piece of evidence we presented, Lola's voice rang clear, tells a story of courage in the face of unspeakable trauma. It is your duty to give that courage a voice, by returning a verdict that speaks the truth, guilty. The jury, after hours of deliberation, returned with their decision etched on their faces, a mix of solemnity and resolve. Guilty, the foreman announced, and a collective sigh rippled through the room. Lola's heart thundered in her chest, not from victory, but from the gravity of what this meant for the survivor. Her dark eyes glistened with the weight of responsibility she carried, knowing her role in the fight against such heinous acts was far from over. But today, justice had been served, and as she exited the courtroom, the pride she felt was not for herself but for the strength of the woman who had dared to stand up and speak out. Tom waited for her, leaning against the wall, with an expectant look. His gaze softened when he saw her, and without a word, he closed the distance between them, enveloping her in a hug that promised solace and understanding. Congratulations, he whispered, and though he knew the arduous journey this trial had been, he recognized that Lola's tears were not just for sorrow or relief, but for a battle well fought and won. In the embrace, Lola felt a dam breaking within her, tears streaming down her cheeks, each one a silent testament to the harrowing images and testimonies she had witnessed. Everyone thinks winning is supposed to feel good, Lola murmured, her voice muffled against Tom's soft flannel shirt. She pulled back slightly to look up at him, her dark eyes reflecting the faint glow of the street lights. But there were moments in there, things I can't unsee or unhear. Tom met her gaze, his own eyes revealing a depth of empathy beyond his usual jovial facade. I know it was tough on you, he said softly, thumbing away a tear that clung stubbornly to her cheek. It's going to be in the local paper tomorrow, she started. The evidence, the photos, the 911 call, it was brutal, Tom. And the worst part was seeing her there, reliving it all as the defense tried to tear her apart. Lola watched as Tom's jaw tightened, the muscles tensing with a mixture of anger and protectiveness. But you gave her a voice, he said, his voice low and steady. You stood up for her when she needed it most. Did I do enough? She asked, not expecting an answer, but needing to voice the doubt that clawed at her insides. Did I do right by her? More than enough, Tom assured her, pulling her back into his embrace. Sometimes I wonder why I do this to myself, Lola confessed, allowing herself to lean into his strength. But then I remember, it's for them. For justice. Because you're amazing, Lola, Tom said, his voice infused with a warmth that wrapped around her like the comfort of a well-loved quilt. And don't you forget it. Hey, Tom whispered. There's something I need to tell you. His chest vibrated against her back with every word, a resonance that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. What is it? She asked. I love you, Lola. Are you sure? She breathed out, half laughing, half incredulous. Never been surer of anything in my life, he said, his voice steady and sure. A smile bloomed on her lips, a reflection of the joy that bubbled up within her. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. I'm in love with you too, Tom Carter. The following afternoon Lola and Rachel went through the aisles of Montague's boutique, the local treasure trove of fashion in their small Texas town. Something sophisticated, but with a bit of sass, Rachel suggested. You want to knock 'em dead at this cocktail event, without giving the impression I'm trying too hard, Lola added. Exactly. Confidence is your best accessory, Rachel affirmed, pulling out a sapphire number that seemed to shimmer with hidden depths. How about this one? Too conservative. Lola returned the dress to its place among the others. The event with the district attorney and city officials wasn't just another work function, it was a celebration of her victory. She wanted her outfit to be a statement, not a whisper. Ooh, what do you think of this? Rachel held up a red dress. Lola hesitated, imagining the bold color against her olive skin. It's beautiful, but... Say no more, I've got just the thing. Rachel disappeared between the racks and re-emerged with a black dress that promised sophistication with its tailored lines, yet hinted at the daring with a tasteful plunge at the neckline. Rachel, it's perfect, Lola admitted, fingers caressing the fabric. It was the kind of dress that didn't scream for attention, but commanded it effortlessly, the sort she hadn't known she was looking for until now. Then let's not waste another minute, Rachel declared, ushering her friend toward the fitting rooms with a supportive hand at her back. As Lola stepped into the dress and zipped it up, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The black fabric accentuated her curves, the neckline teasing a glimpse of décolletage. She looked powerful. The image staring back at her was a woman who was ready to take on the world. Wow, Lola, Rachel's voice was a mix of awe and approval from the other side of the curtain. You're going to turn heads tonight, thanks to you, Lola replied, meeting Rachel's gaze in the mirror. There was a sense of solidarity there, a shared moment of triumph between two women who understood the importance of standing tall in a world that often overlooked them. Let's go show 'em how it's done, Rachel said, her smile contagious. Let's, Lola agreed, feeling a surge of excitement for the evening ahead. With a dress that felt like armor and a heart newly awakened to love, she was ready for whatever came next. Lola got out of Tom's truck, hearing the distant clink of glasses and laughter that spilled from the open doors of the community center. Tom was at her side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He wore a charcoal gray suit that was cut to perfection, showcasing his broad shoulders. The room hushed for a moment as they entered, the dimmed chandeliers casting an amber glow over Lola's curves. Heads turned, gazes lingering not on the lawyer they knew, but on the woman who seemed to transform before them. Men she had spent countless hours alongside in sterile courtrooms now approached with hesitant smiles, extending hands with offers of a dance. May I have this dance, Miss Sanchez? One asked, his voice a blend of respect and newfound admiration. Of course, Lola replied, her words wrapped in the confidence she felt. She moved through the steps effortlessly. Each partner brought a different tempo, but it was Tom's gaze she felt upon her, a storm brewing behind his dark eyes. "Seems like you're the belle of the ball tonight," Tom murmured when she returned to him, his attempt at lightness betrayed by the tension in his jaw. "Is that jealousy, Mr. Carter?" she teased, reaching for a glass of water from a passing tray, her fingers brushing against his. But Tom's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and he looked away, watching as another gentleman approached, requesting yet another dance. The dances blurred into a single thread of motions, laughter, and the warmth of hands that were not Tom's. When it was time to leave, the cool leather of Tom's car seats felt foreign against the heat of her skin, the silence between them a stark contrast to the evening's melody. They pulled up to her home, the porch light casting a golden halo on the gravel driveway. Lola turned to him, expecting the usual tender end to their evenings, but Tom's lips remained firmly in place, a line of restraint. "Good night, Lola," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of the softness she'd grown accustomed to. "Good night," she echoed, her heart catching on the edge of confusion. His expression was unreadable. "Good night," he repeated, a finality that left her reaching for the door handle. Inside her home, the silence was a stark contrast to the lively hum of the cocktail party. Lola tossed her clutch onto the hallway table, the sound of it landing far too loud. She kicked off her heels and padded into the kitchen, where she leaned against the counter with furrowed brows. She replayed the evening in her mind, the way the other men had looked at her, their eyes alight with a new recognition. The feel of different hands as they circled her waist during dances, polite yet firm, and then there was Tom's sudden coldness, the distance in his voice, the absence of his touch. "Que demonios," she muttered to herself, reaching for a glass and filling it with tap water. She remembered the taste of the evening's hors d'oeuvres, how each bite was a well-crafted symphony of flavors meant to impress. Lola couldn't help but draw parallels between the carefully curated menu and her life, every detail meticulously planned, from her career to her wardrobe choices. She could never have prepared herself for the sting of rejection she felt from Tom. "Talk to me, Tom," she whispered to the empty room, her voice tinged with frustration. "Is it because they saw me differently?" she pondered aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Does he think I enjoyed the attention too much?" But deep down, Lola knew she had only been polite, her thoughts never straying far from Tom. As the night deepened outside her window, Lola's resolve hardened. Tomorrow, she'd confront Tom. She needed answers. Chapter 11. Lola's sneakers squeaked against the polished hardwood floor of the gym as she tried to match Tom's relentless pace. "Come on, Lola. Focus," Tom called out, his voice full of anger instead of motivating. His dark hair was slick with sweat, clinging to his forehead as he eyed her form with an intensity that felt less like concern and more like frustration. She pushed a stray lock of her own damp hair behind her ear, her breath coming out in short huffs. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked between lunges, her tone a blend of confusion and concern. Tom paused, resting his hands on his hips. The coldness in his eyes was something new, something she couldn't quite read. It was as if he'd built a wall between them, brick by icy brick. "Talk to me, Tom," Lola implored, halting mid-motion, her curvy figure poised in expectation of his answer. Her heart pounded not from the workout but from the fear of losing the connection they had nurtured beyond these gym walls. He let out a slow breath, the weights in his hands seeming to anchor him to the spot. "It's just," he hesitated, the struggle evident in the clench of his jaw. "At your party, watching you dance with every other guy there. It got to me." Lola's chest tightened, a pang of realization washing over her. She set down her weights and stepped closer, her gaze locked onto his. "Tom, I didn't know you felt that way. The party, it was to celebrate my winning such a high-profile case. I thought I had to be everywhere, with everyone. But the truth is, even as I danced with them, it was you I was thinking about. Only you." For what seemed like an eternity, Tom simply looked at her, the warmth slowly returning to his gaze as he absorbed her earnest declaration. Then, as if surrendering to an invisible force, the rigidity in his posture softened. Only me, huh? He finally murmured, a hint of his usual playfulness creeping back into his voice. Only you, she affirmed, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Tom sighed, the unfamiliar weight of jealousy still pressing uncomfortably on his chest. I've never really felt this jealousy before, he confessed. He shifted uneasily on his feet, the soles of his sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished gym floor. And I didn't like it, not one bit. But, he continued, lifting his gaze to meet hers, I guess I can see why those guys were drawn to you. A small, begrudging smile tugged at the corner of his lips. You're beautiful, Lola. For a moment, Lola forgot the mirrored walls and the rows of dumbbells, all she saw was Tom, his vulnerability laid bare. She couldn't help the laughter that bubbled up from within, light and airy, as she closed the distance between them. Lola threw her arms around him, her embrace firm yet gentle. Tom, she said, her voice muffled against the fabric of his workout shirt, you are the only one who sees me that way. He stiffened for a mere second before his arms came around her, pulling her closer. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the rhythm a comforting reassurance. Only one, huh? His words vibrated through her as he held her tight. Only one, she whispered back. Later, as they left the gym, Lola glanced over at Tom, his dark hair clinging to his forehead, a sense of ease filling the space between them. They walked side by side through the quaint streets of their small Texas town, the fading sunset casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Come on, I'm starving, Lola said, her voice a mix of hunger and contentment. Let's head to Maria's Cantina. Tom nodded, his neatly trimmed beard doing little to hide the smile that tugged at his lips. They made their way to the local Tex-Mex place, its neon sign buzzing gently in the twilight. As they entered, the familiar scents of spices and sizzling meat greeted them like an old friend. They slid into a booth upholstered in red vinyl, the menu cards already memorized from countless visits. Your usual? Tom asked, arching an eyebrow playfully as he eyed the waitress heading their way. Always, Lola replied with a chuckle. She never tired of the chicken enchiladas, bathed in verde sauce. Their meals arrived, steaming plates set down with a clatter that mingled with the lively chatter around them. They ate in comfortable silence. Midway through the meal, Tom's hand disappeared into his pocket. When it re-emerged, it held a small velvet box, fingers gentle around the edges. His fork lay forgotten beside his half-eaten burrito as he slid the box across the table toward her. The sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background, the world narrowing down to the man before her. Will you marry me, Lola? His voice was steady, but she could see the pulse quicken at the base of his throat. The question hung in the air. Lola's heart did a slow, deliberate somersault. She reached for the box, her fingers brushing against his. Inside, nestled against the velvet lining, was a ring that captured the last rays of daylight, turning them into a dance of sparks. Yes. Her reply was not just to his question, but to all the unasked ones that lingered. Tom's grin was a thing of pure joy as he took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly as if it had always belonged there. They finished their meal, now punctuated with excited whispers of the future. They spoke of the dreams they each held for the future. The children they wanted. The life they would build together. As they strolled out of Maria's Cantina, Tom's hand was a steady presence in hers, grounding her to the moment which still felt like a dream half expected to dissolve into the night air. Isn't it strange, she murmured, more to herself than to him. We were just having a fight? Tom finished her sentence. Lola nodded, still processing the roller coaster of emotions that had brought them here. Her brows knitted together as she looked up at him, the moonlight casting gentle shadows on his chiseled features. The anger that had tightened his jaw earlier was now replaced by something softer. I know, he said, his thumb caressing the back of her hand. I'm sorry for how I acted before. It's just, he paused, searching for the words as they walked past the twinkling lights of the town square. Tell me, she urged, squeezing his hand. Tom turned to face her, his eyes reflecting both determination and a hint of fear. Lola, amor mio, he began, using the term of endearment that always sent warmth flooding through her veins. When I saw you there, laughing and dancing, I was jealous. And not just a little. I've never felt that way before, and I hated it. She bit her lip, recalling the intensity of his gaze across the crowded room. But then, I realized why. I realized it's because I love you so much, he continued. You are this incredible, vibrant force, and the thought of losing you to someone else shook me. I need to know that you're mine, that we're in this forever. His words hung between them, earnest and raw. Lola felt a swell of emotion rise within her, threatening to spill over. Here was the man who had supported her as she'd grown stronger, who had celebrated her victories as if they were his own, and now, his vulnerability laid bare, he was asking for the assurance she found she needed just as much. Forever is a long time, she whispered, the corner of her mouth lifting in a tender smile. Then let's start with today and see where life takes us, he said. Today sounds perfect, Lola agreed. Good night, Tom, she whispered, her voice heavy with the promise of tomorrow. Good night, love, he replied, his eyes lingering on her face, imprinting the moment into memory. Lola's thumb hovered over the glowing screen, the rest of the world fading into a blur as she tapped out the message with a mix of urgency and disbelief. Girls, you're not gonna believe this. Tom asked me to marry him. Start dusting off those dancing shoes, because we've got another wedding coming up. She added a smiley face and an engagement ring to the text, not able to stop grinning. She hit send. The phone vibrated almost immediately in response, a cascade of exclamations and emojis flooding the screen as her friends shared in her joy through digital squeals and rapid-fire questions. Sarah's reply came first, her words infused with the warmth that always seemed to radiate from her like the comforting scent of freshly baked bread. Lola. I'm tearing up over here. I knew that man was head over heels for you. Rachel's message followed swiftly, filled with the caring undertones that mirrored her motherly embrace. Oh, my stars, Lola. We need details. When? How? Tell us everything. Danielle's response held a touch of whimsy. Is this real life or a fairy tale? So happy for you, Lola. Your own romance novel is coming true. And Natalie, ever the nurturer, reminded her of practicalities even amidst the excitement. Don't forget to breathe, lols. And show us that ring. We've got a wedding to plan and self-care routines to maintain. The messages came in a flurry, each one wrapping around Lola like a warm embrace, infusing her with their collective strength and support. She had the best friends in the world, and soon, she'd have the best husband. Life was certainly looking up. Epilogue. Lola looked over at Tom. In the months since their engagement, they'd found a house they would raise their children in, and they had planned what Lola thought was the perfect wedding. They only had 3 more days to wait until they would be husband and wife. It seemed as if the engagement had lasted forever and been over in the blink of an eye. Oh, how her life had changed since meeting Tom. And she couldn't wait for their future. Love was all around her. She just had to acknowledge it.